by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, you have before you a copy of the modified written agenda. Are there any proposed revisions to the agenda as written?
I've got a few.
Alderman Dumas?
I'd like to put the minutes on consent.
All right. You have,
That's correct.
As corrected.
all right, proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place the approval of the minutes, item 4A, as corrected on the consent agenda. Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, you have further proposed revisions.
I do. Under board business, item J on consent.
All right, the proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item 10J, the approval of the minutes from the public hearing held on April 28, 2012 on the CDBG grant application for the Carver Drive ditch improvements as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, you have further proposed revisions.
I'd like to put item K on consent with Alderman Henry Vaughn being our delegate, Mayor Parker Wiseman, and Alderman Richard Corey as the two delegates.
Is it two
Alternatives, I'm sorry.
All right, so Alderman Dumas has placed item 10K, a resolution appointing Alderman Henry Vaughn as voting delegate, Mayor Parker Wiseman, and Alderman Richard Corey as alternates, otherwise as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
Under board business, I'd like to place item M on consent with Miss Lisa Wynn being named.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place item 10M, the appointment to the Library Board of Trustees for the term ending September 30th, 2015, with the appointee being Lisa Wynn on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
Finally, under personnel, item 1 to consent.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place item 11I1, the approval to advertise to fill an upcoming vacancy for maintenance worker 1 in the new construction rehab division of the Public Services Department as presented on the consent agenda. Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
I do not.
Are there any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions?
I have one I want to. No, that's all right.
Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Is that not on revised? All right, the city clerk has requested, you want this added to the claims docket? Has requested that the invoice from Tyler Technologies at your table for $12,445 be added to the claims docket as it currently stands on the consent agenda. Do we hear a proposed revision?
So moved.
All right, Alderman Sistrunk has proposed revising the agenda to modify item 11C1 which is currently on the consent agenda, and it would remain on the consent agenda. The approval of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments except the fire department as of May 10th, 2012, to include the payment of the invoice to Tyler Technologies as presented. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your proposed revision?
Yes.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been revised and will remain on consent. Any further proposed revision? Any further proposed revision? Alderman Sistrunk.
Item, just 1 second. Item 11G, I have no problem with that being on consent. I do want to say that it got onto consent with the misunderstanding that I was the one that placed it there. But I just want the board to be aware that I did not ask to have that put on consent. I'm not opposed to leaving it there if that's the board's will.
Any further proposed revision?
I just asked a question. Who asked for that to be put on consent?
Ms. Sproul?
I actually put it on consensus, but she could agree, so it's been changed. I did not.
Who made the recommendation?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Perkins.
let me say, we got enough business on the agenda tonight. If anyone on this table have any objections to Alderman Perkins being the chairperson, I'm gonna withdraw my consent immediately. This is nothing I'm getting, I'm not, this is a public service, and if there's any issue, let's get this cleaned up clear, because I'm gonna leave this meeting with a good feeling, get some good rest tonight, because I got a busy week. So if anybody got any, are we talking about the chairperson of the?
Yes, that's, the item in question is item 10G, which is the consideration of the appointment of Alderman Perkins as
Right.
chairperson of the Budget and
Right,
Audit
so
Committee.
I'm just saying, if there's any issue, I'm gonna withdraw my request for the chairperson. If there's any question, objection, I'm done. Okay? So if anybody got any objection, it's gonna be a clean withdrawal. So let me go ahead and say that now, I'm gonna withdraw from consideration, okay? I withdraw that from consideration.
So,
Let's
are you
table that.
proposing to revise the agenda to take
No.
that matter off of the
No,
agenda?
I'm withdrawing from being the chairperson, because there's some issues on that already before we get started talking about it. So I do not want to be considered for it.
All right, so Alderman Perkins has stated that he no longer wishes to be considered to be the chairperson of the Budget and Audit Committee. You still have that matter on the agenda. And unless the board wishes to still discuss that matter at a later point, the agenda needs to be dealt with in some manner.
I request that we remove that item then.
Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion to remove item 10G, the consideration of the appointment of Alderman Perkins as the chairperson of the Audit and Budget Committee from the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may, but let me see if there's any objection.
Okay. Well,
Any-
we got a
any
motion,
objection?
no second yet.
Yeah, this is just for a revision.
Okay.
We're not doing a motion. If anybody has an objection, then it would have to be revised by motion. Is there any objection to so revising the agenda? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been removed from the agenda. Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to know, just a clean statement here, who desires to be chairperson of this committee? Ms. Sistrunk, the vice mayor, has voluntarily, willingly, and freely stepped aside on it, and so there needs to be some leadership for the board and for the city of Starkville. We have a $16 million budget, and and let me just say just a couple more statements. These are real clean statements. I just was trying to volunteer my service and my experience, and I don't have any agenda. My only concern is promoting the best interests of the city of Starkville. So we need a chairperson, so somebody needs to be the chairperson. If the vice mayor don't have one, at least two members on the committee, the gentleman from 3 and myself. As alderman. So we need they're just in the best interest of the city. The taxpayers deserve that, not Alderman Perkins. But we need to have a chairperson. We don't have to have it at this meeting, but maybe forthcoming here. We need to make sure that we handle this city's business in a very dignified way. I have no problem with it coming off the agenda tonight. And let's get somebody who's interested in being that. And maybe that person will have a lot of experience and be able to provide some proven leadership on these things. So I'm looking forward to some very conservative leadership for the city of Starkville, Mississippi, with regard to this budget and audit committee. I yield the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any further proposed revisions to the agenda? Any further proposed revisions to the agenda is written? Any further proposed revisions? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to approve the agenda as revised. Alderman Corey, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. All those in favor of Alderman Corey's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. All right, let's try that again. All those in favor of Alderman Corey's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. That will carry us to the approval of the consent agenda as revised. Is there any objection to the approval of the consent agenda as revised? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as revised has been approved. And that will take us to announcements and comments by the mayor and members of the board. I have one tonight, and that is May is a 5 Tuesday month, so we would normally have 2 consecutive Tuesdays off, which is a bit atypical for us, but it is time for us to have another work session to hopefully finalize our capital improvement plan. Our consultant has told me that he is able to have a draft ready by May 29th, where he could be here at our standard 5:30 time. So on May 29th, we'll have a work session to go over the draft of the capital improvement plan and hopefully finalize anything that needs to be done with it prior to the board taking it up for consideration sometime this summer. Do we have any comments by the members of the board? Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for your further recognition. I want to take this moment of personal privilege to commend our outgoing city clerk for her 28 years of very good service. Of those 28 years, Ms. Outlaw and I have worked together for 19 years. I became a member of this board back on about the 6th day of July of 1993. I'm certain Ms. Outlaw can attest to the fact that I have given her strong support on this board. I was very pivotal support with regard to her becoming city clerk of the city of Starkville. She has served in various capacities during her tenure here. We'd like for the record to reflect that she has worked along with me in a very loyal, committed, in a dedicated fashion, and I want to commend her for that. I did spend some time with her trying to encourage her to at least finish this term out, and of course, and she and I had this conversation some time ago, but it appeared at that time that the decision was in the history book for her to retire. So with that being said, I want to state that we will miss her leadership, and I want to further say to her that we wish her the best of success in all of her endeavors. This is her last board meeting. She has served with distinction. She and I have not agreed on everything. I think I have supported her on about 99. As I told her all the time, I support her about 99% of the things, and she knows that. And so, but nevertheless, we pray that she will have great success in all her future endeavors, and may God continue to bless her. And we just want to thank her for exemplary service. And one last thing I want to say, in my selection of her as Employee of the Month in January 2012 is clear evidence of my acknowledgement of her this genuine leadership. And Ms. Brewer knows that, if you make the Employee of the Month with my presentation, you got to, in my opinion, give mountaintop service. So, and so I want to commend her for that. And she's leaving with, in my opinion, with a positive mark, and she has left her imprint on that city clerk's office. And there was been only 2 city clerks during my 19 years here with the city of Starkville, and that was Miss Vivian Collier, who served, I think, from 1993 to 2004. And then Ms. Outlaw came and served from 2004 through the end of this month of 2012. So Ms. Outlaw, just want to say congratulations, and we thank you for your years of service. And again, may God continue to bless you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have any further?
And Mr. Mayor, one last thing. Let me go ahead and recognize, and I'm always trying to be clean and straight on all the comments. So let me try to go ahead and recognize my desk mate here to my left, the gentleman from 5. I want to recognize and commend him for the award that was mentioned in Sunday's paper. You all read about it, and he can tell you more about it. But that was, I think, he was the only award in Mississippi, I believe, and that's distinction. And when you get those kind of awards, they don't hand those awards out just to give them to you. They're no gift. You have to work for these things. These things, and whoever gets the award, you have to work hard. It takes dedication. You have to work untiringly. It takes commitment. You have to give yourself, your service, and your time. So that's what I'm saying about the gentleman on that award, and about the clerk who's about to leave us. I hope that she would change her mind and maybe stay with us. But nevertheless, thank you, gentlemen, for the award. Yes, sir. Congratulations.
Do we have any other announcements or comments from the members of the board? Alderman Corey.
Yeah, it's already been approved on the consent agenda, but I do want to take a moment to congratulate the Heritage Museum for the work they do. They're now in phase 4 of the renovation projects to that building. It has been an amazing and transformative process. And just also want to mention that we are going to be losing the leader of the Heritage Museum, Joan Wilson, who's here now. She's certainly put in plenty of time and service and dedication to the museum, and so I just want to recognize that.
And I will just note that the only announcement we've had so far that nobody clapped for was me announcing the work session on May. In all seriousness, Ms. Wilson, thank you so much for all that you've done. You have truly taken the Heritage Museum to new heights.
Well, may I use my citizens' comments for a minute then? This is Betsy Longest. She's going to be the new chair. So when you see her on the front row, you know she's representing the museum. So this is our spot. And I do hope you'll give her the support and the continued support for the museum.
Do we have any further announcements or comments from the members of the board? Any further announcements or comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll move to citizen comments. And at this time, any citizen wishing to make comments may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Good evening to the mayor and board. My name is Adam Dunn, Ward 7. We want to recognize Vice Mayor Citron, Alderman Vaughn, Alderman Perkins, Marquis H. Seagull.
Good evening, Mr. Turner.
Citizens have some concerns. We don't know who is just putting over people. Don't know whether they have a vendetta against the police department or what, but we very edgy about whoever this is. Hope that whoever they are be caught soon, so that it won't put a dark cloud over the police department that protects us. At the last meeting, I said that needed to slow down in Pecan Acres. A young child almost got hit last week. It's 20 miles an hour through there by the house. The motor seen him just in time stop. All right, he's 4 years old. All right. People come through there running 40 miles an hour. 40 miles an hour is different from 20. School is out. We have a lot of bikes on the street, a lot of scooters. And if you run that speed, you're not gonna be able to stop. We also would like to hope that we have a receiving clerk and a general record clerk in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Do we have any further citizen comments tonight? Any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move to public appearances. We have no public appearances tonight, so we'll move to public hearings, and we have quite a few public hearings tonight. The first public hearing we'll have is the second public hearing on the amendment of the sidewalk ordinance 2011-01. Alderman Dumas, would you like to introduce?
While Joel is pulling this up, you've got, make sure I've got my documents here. Thank you. I'm not going to go over all the changes that we went over the last time. There has been one addition. As you look through, you can see all the changes that have been noted, those that are underlined, those that are double strike. One of the biggest additions that we've included in this is, now, Ms. Spruill, you're going to have to help me on this. The clean version does have the striking of the roads themselves, the names themselves. And Alderman Perkins, I do want to just make sure that that's okay with you in regards to removing 4.8 under sidewalk requirements. That sentence read, specific exemptions are enumerated as following: the City of Starkville Industrial Park area, bound by Industrial Park Road, Pollard Road, Miley Road, and Airport Road. And since most of those are included, but yet there are several others, what the intent was is that we would enumerate those deleted streets not by text in the ordinance, but by showing it on the map. Are you okay with that?
Let me just say, gentlemen, so the record will be clear before we get this final passage on this. So am I correct to understand that the specific exemptions that are enumerated, which include Miley Road and Pollard Road and Industrial Park Road, they are specifically covered and taken care of as exemptions? And Mr. Attorney, you're in agreement with us on that? You're, Mr. Lawyer?
They're expressly written.
I mean, in other words, and I want to be clear, and I hear the gentleman from 5, but I want legal confirmation as well, that those roads are exempted with the other language in the ordinance.
Yes.
So in other words, all those roads are specifically exempted from the sidewalk.
But now, they are. But let me,
Mr. Attorney?
Yes, I mean, it's expressly written that they are exempted in the ordinance.
But even with the deleting that 4.8?
That's right.
Okay,
The 4.8 stays in with that express exemption.
no, in the clean version that's shown under the adoption phase under board business, we have stricken 4.8
And this change was made,
between the two public hearings. And the reason it was done so was because it's expressed on the map, and we just wanted to be clear. I don't have any problem with them being in there, but because there are several other streets that fall under that same category of being excluded, we didn't want to. I asked Ms. Spruill just to take it out to clean the language up. I don't have any problem with it being included. They are deleted expressly in the amendment, which is this, and that's why I want to raise this first so we can work this through.
Mayor, since the gentleman asked me a question, let me just briefly say, I have not seen the version that the gentleman from 5 is referring to, with the clean copy that removes 4.8. Having not read that new version, I don't feel comfortable removing 4.8. I know we have a finding of fact in the proposed draft that I last saw that gives a rational basis as to why we leave that exemption, but I have not seen a version that removed those specific enumerated streets. I don't get emails, so, during the day.
Well, it's in the,
Okay, but I didn't see it. I don't see it. But nevertheless, if the attorney is satisfied with that, I'm gonna go on his signature here. You're satisfied that if we delete 4.8, those areas are still specifically and clearly exempted. So if a court of competent jurisdiction review this ordinance, they'll know that those roads are exempted.
Because they clearly fall outside the
Okay.
sidewalk development area as shown on the map.
That's
correct?
correct.
Well, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be sure.
and just on those same legal terms, this is associated with the ordinance, and this is the first time perhaps I've seen this, shown as the amendment. The clean version is agenda item X.C. So there's a, I just want to be clear that it's understood that the map is the amendment, or the, not the amendment, the appendix that's included in the ordinance that carries the weight of the development area. And you understand that to be true?
This is all I got on my desk.
No, this is included in your packet.
It's
I got
the
that.
document that was
It's
in
the
your original
document that's in the
packet.
packet as far as consideration of approval.
But it has 4.8 in it.
Well, no, and I want to, and this was some confusion I had, and that's why I brought all this up. There were several things stapled together in the packet. The building codes were stapled together with the sidewalk, so some of these things were hidden. We actually have two versions of the ordinance in our packet. The ordinance of the version that is agenda item 8.A is the public hearing one that still has the markups that we're referring to today as part of the public hearing. And then, the one that's actually up for approval is the clean version, which is X.C, and it was hidden, I believe, behind the,
It's intermingled with the minutes.
it's intermingled with the minutes. That's correct.
All right, so let me be clear on this, Alderman Dennis, because the version in the e-packet certainly had 4.8 involved. And 4.8 is a specific exemption for the City of Starkville Industrial Park area bounded by Industrial Park Road, Pollard Road, Miley Road, and Airport Road. Was that exemption for sidewalks total, or was that exemption just like the rest of the sidewalk development area or the non-sidewalk development area where the sidewalks don't have to run to undeveloped adjacent parcels?
The way 4.8 is written is reflected in the map. The biggest issue associated with that is that the way that language is written, the east side of Industrial Park Road, as has always been the case with this map as presented since the first public hearing, the east side of Industrial Park Road down to Sproul Industrial Road is included in the sidewalk development area. And this text did not capture that. All of the west side of Industrial Park Road is included. All of Pollard, all of Miley, all of Airport Road, as Alderman Perkins has asked, has always been in there. This was taken out because the language was inaccurate as written, because one side of Industrial Park Road is included, the other is not. And so I asked Ms. Sistrunk just to take this out so that it would be clear. I mean, not Ms. Sistrunk, I'm sorry. You're getting blamed for a lot of stuff tonight, I'm sorry. Ms. Sproul, just to be clear, that there was no, and that's why I want to just go back to Alderman Perkins, just to make sure that we're clear on all of this. But there was two in the e-packet. There was the public hearing, which was standalone. The clean version reflects 4.8 being stricken. And as I said, I'm okay with that being included. I really am. I just wanted to be clear that we weren't showing some special exception for those areas or weight for those areas when in fact there are multiple other streets that are also excluded as well. But for the record, all this stuff was hidden and stapled all together, so it's hard to find.
Further questions or comments by the
Yeah,
members of
let
the board?
me go on from there. I just want to go over this again, just to talk about the rational basis of this map. What this map shows is, and I asked that this show the bus routes. Again, there were two findings that I really based this development area on. One was density, one was well, it's really three. One was density, one was connectivity to adjacent sidewalk networks, and then the other was how contiguous these areas were to our transit system network that is currently going through the approval process with MDOT. And so what you see are three routes. You see the community route, you see the park and ride connector from the university out to the sportsplex, and then you see the downtown community route, or connector route. One of the bigger issues that we saw moving forward with this is how big of a hindrance these major four-lane highways prove to be to pedestrian movement. So you can see that in these areas, there was a natural exclusionary zone. We included these areas because when you look down in here, there's significant amounts of student population and density in these areas associated with the New Light Road area. We have a sidewalk connectivity with Pine Lake. We have other developments that are there that proved pretty advantageous for internal sidewalk connections there. So that's why those areas are included. Obviously, schools play a big part of this. Emerson School District, or Emerson School is down here, so this is the reason that a Louisville Street extension goes down to Emerson School so that we can see sidewalk developments to Emerson School. Obviously, South Montgomery is a natural area for sidewalk development, as is Highway 12. Lynn Lane Bike Path is a significant project not only of this board but of the previous administration. So there was special. Obviously, we want to look at how we continue to develop that Lynn Lane bike system out Lynn Lane to Industrial Park Road. Other areas in the 5311 transit grant, we had to show connectivity to low and moderate income areas, Department of Human Health areas, other areas associated with common public health, safety, and welfare. The Medicaid office is on Industrial Park Road in this block here. You have the Sportsplex, obviously. You have Ability Works, which is another area that services handicapped individuals on Industrial Park Road. And so you've got some very strong indications of public needs and transportation needs on Industrial Park Road. So it was natural for this east side of Industrial Park Road to be included, not only in the transit system, which you see highlighted in yellow, but with sidewalk development as well. And so that's where this extension here falls in between Sproul, Industrial Park, because of the Sportsplex being a node. There's two routes that meet there, and there could potentially be, and we hope for, significant transit development at this area. Obviously, the Medicaid office, the two obvious closest potential areas for sidewalk development down to the Medicaid office is from Sproul Industrial and Ability Works stops. So those are both areas that stop. The Garrett Road served as a natural boundary. Obviously, we've just completed a significant sidewalk project along the east, along the Garrett Road extension, and that road is proving to be extremely positive. We would like to see that development continue on Garrett Road. Reed Road is another significant sidewalk development area that we've seen, and so it was natural for these areas to show contiguous sidewalk development, and so parcels along Garrett Road up into Reed Road was included as well. I think the rest of these areas speak for themselves as you see the parcels outlaid. The density associated with this from the standpoint of how we look at public health, how we look at public safety, how we look at connectivity, how we look at the economic development aspects of these projects, because there's no doubt that some of these areas make for natural exclusionary zones which are shown there. So those by and large are the rationale and the rational basis for those. If anybody has any more questions about this, I'll be glad to answer them.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board?
Mayor, let me circle back on that question that was posed to me by Alderman Perkins. I think there's enough ambiguity in the ordinance. If 4.8 is taken out, that 4.8 needs to be put back in to spell out that exemption for the industrial park.
Okay. And I'm okay with that.
But in fact, if you put that back in, all of Industrial Park Road is not exempted.
Yeah, we need to clarify that language so that it's clear that the city of Starkville Industrial Park area bounded by, and now it depends on the legalese of this. When you look at bounded, does that include the west side or the east side opposite the industrial park area?
You know my position, Alderman Dumas, that I don't think we should be drafting on the fly at the table anyway. So if there's concern about how this ordinance is drafted, and if we're going to add to it or take away from it, in a substantive manner, my recommendation would be that that triggers another public hearing under our custom and practice of doing so when an ordinance changes substantively at the table.
We have that sentence excluded. If we made the simple addition of being clear that Industrial Park Road was referenced as only the west side of Industrial Park Road, I believe from are we saying even with the addition of the sentence that's in there from the first standpoint that we would still trigger another public hearing?
Where my level of discomfort is coming from is that the ordinance that was in the e-packet that was put out on the website had one language version in it, and then the ordinance that was put in the hard copy of the packets for the aldermen had another version of language, and then we're proposing a third version of language at the table. Even though that third version of language may be simple, I do think that's too many moving parts.
No,
I think there's two different, I mean, you know, always in the public hearing portion of our packet is the current ordinance with stricken and underlined text. So that was in our packet. And then the second version, which was the actual new ordinance and complete without 4.8, was also, it was just, so they were both in the packet. They were both in the packet, I think.
And the one considered for adoption was the clean version without 4.8 being included. So that's been notified since the publication of the
But,
packet.
I mean, I agree with the language. I mean, it doesn't seem like a complicated language change. I mean,
And Lynn, have we done something different from this standpoint from the public hearing with having a working document associated with the public hearing packet set, and then a clean version associated with the adoption set as part of the packet? I mean, that's standard and
That's how we've handled it in the past.
Traditional.
So that the working version, the draft, is shown in the public hearing, so the public can see what the changes are, and then the clean version, the day of adoption, or the proposed day of adoption, is clean and allows the board to have, the statute has a clean day to adopt.
Right. And the intent of this was, and that's why, frankly, that's why I asked for this language to be removed, because the intent was for the appendix of the map to carry the weight of showing the area, not verbiage written, because we could spend pages upon pages of writing the legal description associated with how these boundaries are drawn. And I think I think once you stop that, where does it stop? But I understand where Alderman Perkins is coming from, because he wanted to be clear that the industrial park area was exempted. And I understand that, and I agree, and that's why it's shown that way. But,
So a plausible way to address it is when you're considering the matter, if you feel the need to add a 4.8 back in a modified form, you would just add that as an amendment to what's presented. Alderman Perkins.
Couple of points, and just friendly housekeeping matters. Before any ordinance is acted upon, it should be reduced to writing, the entire ordinance, the statute, the state law, because state law gives any member of the board the right to request that the ordinance be read. And if the ordinance be read, that the entire ordinance has to be there in writing without any amendments. And if any member of the board so requests, according to state law, then the ordinance has to be read by the clerk for the city of Starkville. And so that's clear. So, and not speaking against the gentleman's intent, but probably the cleanliest thing to do would be to make sure we comply with state law and giving deference to what the attorney said. And this just talking straight, no agenda, no issues here, would be just to have everything in writing, including the amendment to clarify, just, to bring that back at the next meeting, and just go ahead and approve that copy, and therefore it won't be any question, and we can get that finalized, because if we got to define this portion of this industrial park road, then that amendment got to be codified, and before we vote upon it, it should be in the written document. So I think we just need to just bring this back at the next meeting with a clean copy, so we'll be in compliance with the law on it.
Well, let me say this. There's been no change whatsoever to the intent of the ordinance. Nothing. It's just about one sentence of whether it's included or not. The copy that was in the packet, and has been since day one, includes a clean version that could be read, and I brought that up just to make sure that we were good with that clean version, with the exclusion of 4.8, which we've already had one meeting about. That has not been reduced to writing, but reduced to map. If that's a legal term or not, I don't know. But I don't want to get in the standpoint of, or get in the process here of going through multiple public hearings just because we're defining what's shown on the map that's already there. So I'll leave it as it is. There is, as Alderman Perkins stated, there has been an addition of a finding of fact on page 1 of the document that's stricken, whereas there's the need to establish a development area for the placement of sidewalks because certain areas in the city are not conducive to pedestrian traffic, and allowances should be made for such distinctions. That's one. Primarily the one big addition other than 3.1C, which is just to clarify and add to this that any property outside the sidewalk development area as identified in this ordinance that is in the process of being developed or for which the developer is currently in the process of obtaining a building permit shall be exempted from the requirements of this existing ordinance during the 30-day time period for the date of passage of this ordinance to its effective date. And that's basically to say that the 30-day period that would start immediately after the passage of this, that any building permit pulled would be exempted from those areas as well. So those are the two additions, and that was cleared through the city attorney. And do you want to say anything to that as far as that falling under the bounds of being a simple item that did not justify the need for another public hearing? But I really want to stress the idea that we're voting on the clean version that's shown in the board packet. I'll leave it at that. I rest my case.
Any further question or comments by the members of the board? Any further question or comments? Any further question or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the citizen comment portion of the public hearing, and we will conduct this as we conduct all public hearings related to an ordinance adoption or an ordinance amendment, and that is we will alternate hearing a maximum of 3 minutes for speaker for and a maximum of 3 minutes for a speaker against. We will go through that process of alternating between speakers for and speakers against until either each side has exhausted a total of 15 minutes or there is no one else wishing to speak. At this time, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance amendment? Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance amendment? Is there anyone wishing to speak against the proposed ordinance amendment?
I'm Chuck Scarborough. I live in Green Oaks, 2305 MacArthur Drive, and I own some land in the industrial park, which for some reason is not going to be exempted. And I don't know why, as I don't think there's any rational basis for not exempting it. So I've sent some emails to the Board of Alderman, and I'd just like to read the first one. Maybe I'll get the rest of them, I don't know. I own several tracts of undeveloped land in the industrial park in Starkville, which I understand is not included in the proposed exemption from the sidewalks ordinance. Since all this land is zoned industrial, I can see no rational reason, either by zoning or location, as to why my land should not be included in the exemption. Excluding my land lowers the value of my land vis-a-vis other undeveloped and similarly zoned, located in zoned property, and gives the other landowners an unwarranted competitive advantage over me. If my information is correct, this smacks of rank discrimination with no rational basis. I hope you will see your way forward to include my land in the exemption to the sidewalk ordinance, and I hereby request that you include my industrial park land in the exemption to the sidewalk ordinance. Part of my land is located west of the Sportsplex and borders on the western side of Sproul Road. That is the north-south portion of Sproul Road, to the west of that. Clayton Richards' property is located on both the north and south ends of my property. I own other industrial tracts that border on Sproul Road, but are located south of said road. I am only asking that you give me the same relief that you give others. Now, I got a reply back from Mr. Dumas. I don't know if he was speaking. May I sit down?
You may.
I don't know if he was speaking just for himself or from other members of the board, and it says this. The justification for the area you mentioned remaining in the development area is because it borders a park and it's in the same block as the Medicaid office. Both of these need service from alternate transportation modes, and while we are hoping for success with the transit grant, the routes will not service the Medicaid office, so sidewalks are warranted, considering the Sportsplex will be a hub with the additional stop at Ability Works just north of Lynn Lane. To me, that's gobbledygook. I don't understand it. Near the Medicaid office is a concrete plant. There's a supervisor's equipment shed. There's Mrs. Sproul's equipment shed, or equipment office, or equipment garage, and there's a Board of Supervisors equipment shed. I don't know what's so important about the Medicaid office versus these other things. This is a piece of land that's owned by somebody out of town and is rented to the state of Mississippi for Medicaid purposes. I don't know what the relationship is between sidewalks and the Medicaid office. I just don't understand it. They've got a whole lot of parking places around it. As far as I know, everybody rides there. Okay. So anyway, and I also don't understand the connection between the Sportsplex and my property. So I sent back this email.
Mr. Scarborough, your time
Time
has
is up.
expired. However, it doesn't look like we're going to have an abundance of people wishing to speak tonight. So without objection, I'm going to extend you for an additional 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor
Seeing
Wise.
none, you can have another 3 minutes.
Dear Mr. Dumas, most of my undeveloped land zoned industrial is west of a ditch and west of the north-south portion of Sproul Industrial Road and west of the Sportsplex. If the city thinks it needs a sidewalk along the west side of the Sportsplex, it can build one along the east side of the ditch. Here's the Sportsplex. Here is a ditch, which used to be a creek, Glen Creek. Then there's a grassy area. Then there's Sproul Industrial Road. Then there's my property. So I don't know if I'm adjacent to the Sportsplex or not. I don't think so. Anyway, so you can build one along the east side of the ditch, or on the west side of the ditch and east of the north-south portion of Sproul Industrial Road, rather than requiring me to build a sidewalk west of the north-south portion of Sproul Road. I still don't understand it. Now, what would be the best option for the city? It would be to build a sidewalk between the ditch and the north-south portion of Sproul Industrial Road. This sidewalk would feed directly into the wooden bridges crossing the ditch. I don't see much connection between my property and the Sportsplex. Just don't see it. I also noticed that the city has not paved the north side of the Sportsplex, which runs along the south side of Lynn Lane. The city should show some public spirit of its own by constructing that sidewalk. Also, the power station owned by the city on Industrial Road is next to property rented to the Salvation Army. Why hasn't the city built a sidewalk in front of the power station so people can walk to the Salvation Army? The city should show some public spirit by constructing that sidewalk. The Medicare office does not border my land at all, and I fail to see any material connection between the Medicaid office and my property, since my property lies south of the Medicaid office property. Since you supposedly need the sidewalks now, when do you expect me to build these sidewalks? Nobody walks along this road now that I know of. Do you have a pedestrian count? No. Okay. The Medicaid office, located on Industrial Park Road, is rented to the state of Mississippi, Division of Medicaid, by a private individual, Mr. Tom Allred, and there is no sidewalk in front of this property along Industrial Road. But there are plenty of parking spaces. There are no sidewalks leading to the edge of this property. What happens to your argument when the tenant moves and the property is converted to some other use? And of course, there are other properties along there. I don't see what's so significant about the Medicaid office. Big deal. So I think things would work like this. A car passenger will travel by car to the sidewalk you would like me to build.
Mr. Scarborough, your time's
Give me 3 more, I'm almost finished.
Let me give everybody else an opportunity to speak, and if there's nobody else wishing to speak,
Okay.
then I'll give you another 3 minutes.
That'll be.
Is there anyone wishing to speak for, against, or indifferent to the proposed amendment? All right, we do have someone wishing to speak.
Would you waive your right for me to finish in 2 minutes?
No, no.
Okay.
Greeting to the mayor and board. My name is Alvin Ton, Ward 7. I am on the sidewalk committee. Don't need angry people throwing rocks and bricks at me. As I said in the last meeting, since we have 2 lawyers here, the streets that need to be exempted, we need to put signage there so that the pedestrian, bike, or runner will not be on that street and accidentally get hit or some of that nature, because, I'm sorry, that's not gonna help nobody. And they will find ways to sue the city. Landon, we need to have all our I's dotted and all our T's crossed.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Is there anyone else now wishing to speak other than Mr. Scarborough on the proposed ordinance amendment? Anyone wishing to speak? All right. Seeing no one, Mr. Scarborough, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to conclude your thoughts.
That'll be fine. So, there's no sidewalk in front of the Medicaid office. So I think things will work like this. A car passenger will travel by car to the sidewalk you would like me to build, then the car passenger will become a pedestrian and walk along my sidewalk. And then the car will pick up the pedestrian, at which point the pedestrian becomes a passenger again and haul them to the Medicaid office. The car would drop the passenger off at the end of the sidewalk in front of the Medicaid office, so the passenger would become a pedestrian again. If only there were a sidewalk in front of the Medicaid office. My land is zoned industrial, and not exempting me from the sidewalk ordinance puts me at a competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis the other exempted landowners in the industrial park. This non-exemption falls harder on me than all the other non-exempted landowners. Sidewalks are entirely out of place in the area of Starkville zoned industrial. The Medicaid office is in an industrial area, so that cannot justify excluding me from the exemption. Can't the same argument be used against the other part of the industrial park that is exempted? No. Well, then one more little short thing and I'll sign off. All I'm asking for is fair and equal treatment. And I do not wish to fight with anyone. I'm addressing this to Mr. Dumas, referring to his email. Your justification is not rational. I am asking that all land that I own that is zoned industrial be exempted from the sidewalk ordinance. I am also asking that all other individuals' property which is zoned industrial also be exempted, because I do not wish to gain any competitive advantage over others, which is achieved through the political process. And I have copies of this if you'd like to look at it. I mean, I'll give it to you.
You could present a copy to the clerk.
I'll just give one to you.
Give it to the city clerk, Mrs. Carver. Thank you.
You want some more? It's just-
The clerk passed out.
Oh, you'll pass them out.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for extending my time. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Scarborough. Thank you. All right, is there anyone wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, that will conclude the citizen comment portion of this, our second public hearing on the amendment of the sidewalk ordinance. Do we have any final comments by the members of the board? Alderman Davis.
Let me just say this. You know, as it currently stands, we've got a sidewalk ordinance that categorically includes every parcel in this town into a sidewalk development area. And I know I've said in this spot, and I have argued very passionately for that ordinance to stand firm. And I did so for reasons that I won't go into here. But I'll be the first to admit that I firmly believe that we don't need sidewalks everywhere in this town. We don't. And I think we all agree with that. I disagree wholeheartedly with the comments just made about the rational nature of my justification. I think there's strong justification for it. And I take offense to the fact that, you know, what's to concern with the Medicaid office. I can't speak for the Department of State, or the state of Mississippi, the Department of Health, and the Medicaid office, and their decision of putting a Medicaid office, which fundamentally services low and moderate individuals. They provide a great service in a city that needs that great service. And I can't make excuses for them going into an industrial area, to a manufacturing area, and putting their facility in an area that is non-conducive to the individuals that they serve. I can't make excuses for that. And I can't justify that. But I can justify the fact that I've sat on a board. I can justify the fact that I have served on a committee that has done everything we can to secure funding for a transit system in this community, whose sole purpose, even though it's written by the university, sole purpose is to also fundamentally serve areas in this community who significantly need alternative transportation. You know, we're not going down South Montgomery. We're not coming into Octavall Gardens. We're not going into Green Oaks. And we're doing that because those individuals, by and large, don't need it. We're focusing on the areas that fundamentally need these types of services. And the key principle with that is that we're trying to link them with services that they need. That being shopping, that being Medicaid systems, it being downtown, it being Walmart, it being the hospital, it being the Department of Health, it being community counseling. And that's the fundamental basis behind this program. There are multitudes of kids associated with those systems that also need fair and equal connections to sports in this town. All of our baseball facilities, all of our soccer facilities, everything are on Lynn Lane at the Sportsplex. Those individuals who don't have cars are the same individuals who probably need to get to the Medicaid office on a different time. They're the same individuals that need those services in those areas. You know, Mr. Mullendore, this is not about your parcel. It's about a greater network. And unfortunately, I'm not, Mr. Mullendore, I'm sorry, Mr. Scarborough, I apologize. Different conversation. But the whole process behind this thing is that this is sitting in the situation between the standpoint that you've got a sportsplex that serves a great need, you've got different areas that are in there, and unfortunately, we have extreme lapses in those networks that service those things. I don't know how best to justify that than the fact that there is a tremendous need for these services in these areas that are shown here. I've reduced to writing I want to clarify this before we get into before we go out of the public hearing part of this. I'm going to suggest that we add back 4.8 into the clean version that is presented as the adoption part of this, and that we add 4.8 back in there. Let me be sure I get this right. And the only thing we change is taking out the language of bounded by and include the language including parcels on the west side of. And so as in its entirety, 4.8 would read, specific exemptions are enumerated as follows. The City of Starkville Industrial Park area, including parcels on the west side of Industrial Park Road, Pollard Road, Miley Road, and Airport Road. And keep 4.8 in the clean version that's for adoption. And I'm handing that to the city clerk. Mr. Mayor, I rest my case.
All right, any further concluding? Alderman Carver.
I've been taking a couple notes, I guess. I'll say how I feel about it. Most people in here probably already know from previous meetings and previous public hearings, but I had a baseball coach one time that said he used to always say a bad plan is better than no plan at all, and I always disagreed with that, and I think this pertains, that quote pertains to this for me personally. I think this plan's bad for a lot of reasons. I think this is convoluted and complex looking up here. You know, when you get into legality of which side of the road that Mr. Scarborough would be exempt and not exempt, I just don't think that you know, when you get to a meeting, you start discussing it in the meeting and trying to finalize it in the meeting at the second public hearing. I don't think that's good protocol. Make no mistake about it, it's going to be a 4-3 vote. That's what it was the first time. But I think they know that they've got their 4 votes. I think blinders are on, kind of like a horse, and I think that everybody that votes for this has a good heart and they want sidewalks in Starkville for good reasons. But I just don't think this is the best vessel for that. I do also think there's more roads that need to be exempt in the industrial park. Just talking with Mr. Scarborough, one of my constituents, and having talks with him, I think that he is correct in that. I heard somebody say one time in one of these public hearings, it's offbeat, somebody said, yeah, it may take 100 years for all these sidewalks to connect, and that put a light off in my head that said, you know, you hear this board often talk about quality of life and aesthetics and things like that, and everybody in here needs to drive by and look at Nukes. That to me is the example. I go, it's not going to connect east and it's not going to connect west in any of our term, next term, the term after. So what's the point of that? What's the point of doing the Nuke sidewalk? What's the point of doing the Waffle House sidewalk? I mean, the realistic, common sense approach behind that to me says, first, I don't know if they're legal. I don't know if we've discussed the MDOT right-of-ways, if we can even be putting sidewalks right up on the inside the MDOT right-of-way. I'm not sure if it is or not. I don't feel comfortable voting on this tonight. You know, just from that standpoint, falling maybe within the MDOT right-of-way, I know it does. And I'm just going to call, like Alderman Perkins often says, I'm going to call a spade, and it's going to be a 4-3 vote if it gets voted on tonight. Clean or no clean, unclean version, however you want to call it. You know, I guess my greatest fear of the city of Starkville is being a laughingstock in a planning magazine 20 years down the road to understand that 20 years later, we still don't have sidewalks that connect. I'm pro-sidewalk. I'm not saying I'm not. Reed Road and Garrett Road were mentioned up here in the connectivity on the northwest quadrant. Those are taxpayer-funded roads. That's why they look so nice. They were put in, connected an A to a B. When you start putting in bits and pieces here and there and hope they fit and hope something happens 2 terms down the road, and I don't think that's the best plan. So that's my opinion on that. I just wanted to publicly state that I have been against this plan from the start. I'm still against it. I think that if y'all are going to pass this through, you probably need to get back out and cross your T's and dot your I's and make sure that I still hold true to the fact that the industrial park needs to be exempt. And so with that, I turn it over. Thank you.
Further discussion. Alderman Sistrunk?
Okay. I want to make just 2 comments. I appreciate Mr. Scarborough's hyperbole about the car letting someone out,
What
getting back in it.
Maintain decorum.
But the more likely scenario is that someone will walk on the shoulder or in the road. And that's why there is a sidewalk ordinance on the books right now, is to try to provide for the public safety of those people who are walking on the shoulder or in the road at this point in time. I'd also like to point out that there is a sidewalk ordinance on the books right now, and what we're voting on tonight is whether or not to exempt some parts of Starkville. If you're at all interested in taking some parts of the city out, then you're going to vote for this amendment. If not, the amendment on the books right now requires sidewalks everywhere, and this does not in any way get around the argument about piecemeal sidewalks, and I'm not going to go into that particular argument, but the amendment tonight is exempt some portions or leave the entire city covered as requiring sidewalks. Thank
Alderman
you.
Carter.
I got one last point I forgot to mention. Another thing is, probably 80 to 90% of our businesses in the city of Starkville are not national chains, not national chain hotels. They're mom and pops. And what I'm getting from the development, I'll just say it like it is. What I'm getting here and around town is from developers. The word's out there that Starkville's, it's expensive to build here, and the mom and pop people, they just cannot take a $25,000 to $50,000 hit before they ever open their door. And a lot of times, that's something that a national chain can do. So you see that. You see Nukes being able to afford it. You're going to see national chains putting up sidewalks. You're not going to see a lot of mom and pops. I personally couldn't put up a $25,000 to $50,000 check for a sidewalk before I ever sold a hamburger, before I ever put somebody up in my motel for the first night. So I just do not think, from an economic development and a pro-business standpoint, I don't think this is a smart move. I voted against it the first time, and I voted against it tonight. So thank you.
Alderman Parker.
I'll make a couple of points. First of all, I think I've learned I hope I've learned in my brief tenure up here that we definitely don't. I've been against. I was for exempting all of the industrial park from the beginning. However, I do think Alderman Dumas makes a perfect point in that anybody that is going to the Medicaid office would be less apt to have a car than somebody that's not. So I would agree that his justification is correct, and that it needs to be connected with a sidewalk. What I have learned is that while this sidewalk ordinance this revision is not perfect, certain parts of the city will be exempted. If we do nothing, the entire city will still be in the sidewalk ordinance, and I first of all have no idea how these votes come out. I guess I don't have no idea if it's slated to pass or fail here tonight. I know I can place my vote and see how they all come out, but nothing is. If we do nothing, then it's still a citywide sidewalk ordinance. And me personally, I'm going to take advantage of this to say I do think certain areas of the city ought to be exempted. I may think it's more, but I think this is an improvement over what we have. And to do nothing, I think, is going backwards and putting it back where everybody's got to do it. $25,000 to $50,000. I'm in the building industry. That's. I don't think we should be throwing numbers like that around, because I don't think we can throw numbers like that around lightly. But I know that it is an improvement over what we have now, and that's why I'm willing to support this ordinance.
Further discussion. Alderman Dillon.
Let me talk about land use just real briefly, because it's been used quite a bit. To be clear, we have manufacturing land use in this community. And our manufacturing land use, as you remember, with Alderman Carver's amendment that he brought to the table several months ago, it was a small little area of a couple of roads down in the industrial park. They included included industrial park, Sproul, and I forget what all they were, but it was a much smaller grouping of roads than this. And the idea to include or to exclude a complete land use category sounds clean, but the problem is that we have several times in this community or at this board table talked about the need for sidewalks on Highway 12. When you look at the Green Oaks area and you look at that stretch of Highway 12 and you look at the number of people who walk it, you look at the way that roadway has deteriorated because of people walking on the road, it answers the question of whether or not there is a need for a sidewalk there. Well, those areas on the south side of Highway 12 there are all manufacturing land use. And so unless we go in and change land use completely for that area, we would be taking out pieces of Highway 12 that we would not want if we just did it simply on a justification of land use. The idea about the rest of Highway 12, if you remember, we approved several months ago the application for transportation enhancement monies that linked Nukes all the way to the railroad, intersection improvements at Louisville Street and Highway 12, all with the idea that this city is putting its money where its mouth is here to build sidewalk connectivity along Highway 12, just like we've done at Reed, just like we've done at Garrett. So the idea that we're not building sidewalks is completely unfounded. And the idea that we're not moving forward on plans, significant plans for sidewalk developments, sure, in a perfect world, we'd build them everywhere. Most development areas across the country require complete street construction as part of the development. You go out west, there's sidewalks built when roads built, that's built by the developer when they build the roads and curbs. So this isn't anything new. And the idea about laughingstock in economic development, if we become the laughingstock because sidewalks in this community in 20 years, then things categorically would have to change from the way they are now, because we're looked upon as a leader in our requirements of looking at how we push for sidewalks and alternative transportation modes in this community. The Twitter town hall that just finished, over 1,500 people came through. The largest, flat-out, single topic that was discussed more than anything was the need for better sidewalk systems in this town. And this is exactly what that's pointing to. So, I think we have to be very careful from an economic development standpoint to just say that this is a bad model.
Man,
Hold on. Alderman Dumas, are you finished?
I am done.
City Attorney.
I just wanted to put a point on my comments before we move off the item and you guys vote. I've been reading over and over the ordinance as the discussion is going on, and the more and more I read it, the more convinced I become that 4.8 needs to come back in. And the problem is that when you look at Section 3 that talks about subdivisions, both commercial and residential, it says that they are required to build sidewalks, and the only way the sidewalk development area matters there is that a commercially subdivided property, hypothetically in the industrial park, would not have to build sidewalks to non-connected area. They would just have to build internal sidewalks. And so I could see somebody reading Section 3 against Section 4 and saying it's ambiguous, and that's why I think Section 4.8 needs to come back in. The issue then is, what do we do with the revision of Section 4.8 as proposed by Alderman Dumas? It's a short revision. It's easily understood. I understand the argument that it is what the map is saying, that he's just reducing that to writing with his revision. However, I believe it's the best and cleanest practice to let the people speak on the revised language. I don't think it would be per se illegal or improper to vote tonight because the map has been in the packet, but it's not the cleanest legal practice, and it's my job to advise you as to the cleanest legal practice. So I just wanted to make that point.
Alderman Carver.
I'm going to agree with Alderman Dumas in saying that the Green Oak section and probably a couple sections on 182 are the most visibly worn down sections of, we call them people trails in town. And so I guess my question, I've got one for you and one for the city attorney. But in this ordinance, or what we're going to create and draft, how would this address MDOT or state-owned property? How in this ordinance would it ever get a sidewalk on that stretch between the two Green Oak signs, or two Green Oak entrances? Does this address that, or is it?
Alderman Dumas, do you wish to respond?
Well, I mean, obviously, if there's a development that triggers it, they would have to build there, the sidewalks. Now, as far as that stretch there with Green Oaks, that's a pretty solidified area of town, and I think that's where these type of programs with transportation enhancement monies that we've sought to build those sidewalks, that's where those type things come in. 182, I think most could argue that there's a number of redevelopment possibilities on 182 that could spring up over the next 10 years and complete the whole system of 182 from Long Street to Old West Point. There's a whole magnitude of that, but it's You know, it's like the Emerson School model. We don't have, there's no way that we have funding to go all the way down Louisville Street. We're doing what we can down to Academy, or down to Lynn Lane on Louisville Street. But intuitively, we know that that is a significant need for sidewalk development to Emerson School to connect those communities, and it makes sense for those areas to be included in here.
All right, we do still have this matter slated for board business discussion tonight. I will still entertain any concluding comments that board members have. However, we have 2 additional public hearings, so I would encourage all of you to keep your comments as brief in summing up the public hearing as possible.
Well, I had another question. That's what I had, another question for the city attorney.
Let's save the question and comment portion for
Mr. Mayor.
board business.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
don't stop the gentleman. This is the public hearing. He got a right to speak.
Sure.
I think he deserves to be heard.
Sure, and I'm trying to get us through the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, this is,
if-
may I be recognized?
You may.
All due respect to the chair, the gentleman has the right to be heard. We know we have a long agenda, but we can recess this agenda at any time. He has the right to be heard at the public hearing.
And
He can voice whatever comments. He cannot be rushed. There's no time limit. And he can speak as long as he desires to speak, and he can be recognized as long as he desires to be recognized. I mean, don't cut the gentleman short. He's here to represent his constituents.
Alderman, as the chairperson of this assembly, I've got a responsibility to make sure that our comments are germane to the topic that we're discussing. Right now, we're having a public hearing. There will be a time to debate this matter later, and as it is dragging on and on, I am making a recommendation to the board that we conclude the public hearing, and if there's debate to be had, it be taken up in the board business portion. Now, Alderman, I'm not going to make this more contentious than it should be, so I will be glad to entertain any questions or comments that you may have, but I am merely urging the members of the board to wrap this up as quickly as possible so that we can move to the next 2 public hearings on the agenda. Alderman Carver, do you have a question you would like to ask?
I would. To the city attorney, I was gonna ask the legality behind, and this has been asking a lot of questions around town. Is it legal to put these sidewalks with national chains or putting them within the MDOT right of way? Do you know anything if that's even legal for us to do that?
Alderman, I have to look at that further, how this law would screw up against obligations or requirements we would have with MDOT.
Thank you, sir. That's it.
Any further concluding comments by the members of the board? Any further concluding comments? Seeing none, we will move to our second public hearing of the evening, which is our first public hearing on repealing and replacing the 2003 ICC code and the 2005 National Electric Code, that is the ICC and the NEC, with the 2012 ICC and the 2011 NEC. And I will briefly introduce these matters. However, I will note that there is no way any brief introduction could do justice to the volume of material that this entails, because it does in fact entail code books that are multi-volumed and would take up an entire shelf. This is the city building code and the city electric code. They are instruments. The ICC and the NEC are the most commonly used code forms in cities throughout the country. We adopt those 2 standard forms. They come out with new additions periodically, and they are paired together. Ironically, as of right now, I guess our current editions are not the 2 editions paired together. Is that correct? We're in the 03 ICC and the 05 NEC. The way they're typically paired is the NEC runs 1 year behind the ICC. Is that correct?
Mayor, we're actually under the 03 ICE International Code, and it's the 02 Electric Code.
Okay.
The Electric Code, we want to run 1 year behind the ICC.
Okay. This has 05 NEC. So is that a typo?
It is.
All right, so as of right now, we're under the 03 ICC and the 02 NEC. The Fire Ratings Bureau mandates that you do not fall more than 2 ICC code additions behind their most current addition. Well, as of the release of the 2012 ICC code, that effectively put us 3 additions behind on the ICC code because our version is the 2003. That means the 06 was issued, then the 09 was issued, and with the issuance of the 12, we fell 3 additions behind. Knowing that that was upcoming and that adopting a new building and electric code is a massive decision, nearly 18 months ago, the board commissioned a task force to look at the 3 additions subsequent to the 2003 edition. Look at the 2006 ICC, look at the 2009 ICC, and look at the 2012, and determine what the best practice and most practical solution for adopting an updated version of the code was. After doing an exhaustive review that included our building staff, our fire staff, members of the Board of Alderman, also seeking input from the local building and development community, that task force coalesced around the 2012 ICC, which is paired with the 2011 NEC. So those documents are what you have before you tonight. There is one notable departure from the 2012 ICC, and that is that our sprinkler ordinance, as it exists, will substitute for the single-family sprinkler requirements of the 2012 ICC. That was something that was discussed extensively and was a major concern of the task force and the building development community, because the 2012 ICC requires all new single-family homes to be sprinklered. Currently, there is nobody in the state that is doing that, and there was quite a bit of feedback from the home builder community that it is a very onerous requirement that adds quite a bit of cost to single-family building projects. So that task force analysis was the 2012 code as a whole gives you the best instrument going forward, and the only thing that really is totally impractical at this point about the 2012 code is the single-family sprinkler requirement. So that's how the decision originated to go forth with the 2012 code edition. Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll move to the public comment portion of the public hearing, and we will do this in exactly the same manner as the public hearing we just did. At this point, do we have anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance repeal and replace? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Is there anyone now wishing to speak against? Anyone wishing to speak against the proposed ordinance repeal and replace? Anyone wishing to speak for, against, or indifferent to the proposed ordinance repeal and replace? Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing no one, that will conclude the public comment portion of the public hearing. Are there any concluding comments by the members of the board? Any concluding comments by the members of the board? Seeing none, that will conclude the first public hearing on the repealing and replacing of the 2003 ICC and the 2002 NEC with the 2012 ICC and the 2011 NEC. And that will bring us to our final public hearing of the evening, which is the first public hearing on the redistricting process for the city of Starkville. And I'm going to let Mr. Sanford, our consultant, introduce this matter.
Thank you, Mayor, Board. My name is Toby Sanford. You've probably seen me in here before. I am the GIS manager for the Planning and Development District. And we going to go over our 4 plans that we have for our redistricting. My colleague Dave here is going to hand out a handout of all the data that we're about to go over, and I'm going to show it on the screen. Let me just cut it on, or yeah. Also, while we're getting all this ready, I'm going to pass around a handout sheet, a sign-in sheet. I'd like everybody to sign in that is here. You can put your name, your address, and whether you would like to make a comment or not about the redistricting after we go over all the plans. I only have one pen. Does anybody have a pen?
There you go.
Everybody may have one. Thank you, Mayor.
Will I get it back? That's a good
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll make sure. And I'll start one on this side of the room. Everybody, please sign in. Go with it as it is. I'm going to give a short power presentation on redistricting, what the process is, why we redistrict in the first place. Redistricting. The decennial census, and what that means is it has been conducted in years ending in 0 since 1790, as required by the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2. The first decennial census was a simple count. It consisted of 6 questions and counted approximately 3.9 million people. In 2010, 1 million census workers assisted the Census Bureau in counting more than 300 million of the nation's inhabitants. And this is where we get to the point of why we need to redistrict. There are 3 levels of census geography, and we're going to go over, and this is how the census actually counts and knows where people are located and how they can say this area has 10 people and this area over here has 25 people. You should all, this is the state of Mississippi, recognize that star is where the city of Starkville is, not Kibbeha County. See, all these new lines are called census tracts, and it is the largest form of census geography. This is Kibbeha County, and this is where Starkville is located. These census tracts are drawn, and they're drawn pretty much by population, and how much population is in each one of these tracts. So, the next level is called the block group. And the block group subdivides all of these census tracts. So you can see within this bottom census tract has a total population of 7,820, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 block groups located within that. The next and the smallest level of census geography is called the block, and that is what we use to redistrict. Now on this map, you see all these new blue lines. So you see these block groups, and they tell you the population of each one of those block groups, the total population of that tract. And as we zoom down, you can see these blocks, and there's lots of these little blocks, more blocks than there is anything. And you see these lines, and that looks familiar. It looks like creeks, and then where are these lines? And this line right here is our block group line. We throw these roads on here, and you see this is Highway 12, and that's a block group line. This is a creek right here. That's Smith Road. So all of these natural features are what create these block groups. Blocks, I'm sorry. So within that, they count the total people. And this is what we use to redistrict. That's why when you see boundary lines, most boundary lines follow roads, creeks, power lines. That's why the division between two different districts are usually going to be a road or a power line or a creek. These are our existing wards in the city of Starkville. 2010 census counted 23,888 total population, with a breakdown here with white, black, other. The other usually consists of American Indian, Asian, Hopi Indian, Hispanic. So we calculate this ideal, and that ideal means what if it was a perfect world, we would have that many people living in each one of the wards in the city of Starkville. And it comes out to be 3,413. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act says that the variance of the least populous and the most populous district cannot exceed 10%. District 1, or Ward 1, the total population for it, using the 2010 census numbers and the existing ward lines that were last pre-cleared by the Department of Justice, says it has 5,123 people. And that is plus 1,710 above that ideal number. District 2 is below the ideal number with 2,707. It is minus 706. So that means it needs 706 people added to it to bring it up to that ideal number. District Ward 3, total population 4,514, and it is also above that ideal with 1,101. Ward 4, its total population was 3,039, below that ideal number by 374. Ward 5 is 2,831, and it is below minus 582. Ward 6, 2,764, and it is minus 649, below that number. And 7, we finally get to 7, total population 2,910. And it is 503 below that ideal number. And this is our benchmark for 2010 using the existing ward lines in the 2010 census data. You should have this table, and it should be at the top of every one of the tables within here that shows any of our plans. And it's this benchmark, and it breaks down why we have to redistrict. You take that number right there, that total population, this ideal number, and this deviation, and you calculate a variance. And we'll go over that before the end of this little presentation. We'll go to the next one. So the most populated ward is Ward 1. It is 1,710 people above that ideal number. The least populated ward is Ward 2, and it is minus 706. So you take the percentage, and to calculate this variance, you take the number above or below that ideal number, you divide it by that ideal number, and then you come up with a percentage. And it is 50.1% above that population variance. And then we get to Ward 2, and it is minus 706 divided by that number, and we come out with a minus 20.6%. To get that maximum variance, to know what you're over or under, you take the least populous and you add it to the most populous, irregardless of that negative number, and you come out with a maximum variance. And that variance for the city of Starkville is 70.8%, above the allowable 10%, and redistricting is required by federal law. So we come to our plans. Dave, what I want you to do is, you might as well sit here. You can see they're all lined up there on the bottom. I don't know how well they're going to show up on here with this, but you can zoom in and out. My printer is broke yesterday, so I was unable to print my maps I like to put on board, so we're gonna use it up here. Dave can zoom in or out to any area and use this one to zoom in and out. This one. So we look at Plan 1, and Plan 1 and 2 was created by me without any input from the board before any of our first meetings. It was just to show how ways we could get under that 10% mark. So we won't spend much time on these two unless anybody has any questions. Plan 3 and then Plan 4 will be our most favorite plans at the moment. So you look at these numbers, we move some people around, our minimum and maximum changes, and we come down to 7.53%. And that is below that 10% that we have to be by federal law. Plan 2. And there's a little map in here that shows you Plan 1 a little bit better than that does up there. Oh, one other thing I wanted to show you on this is, if you see there look like there are washed out areas in here, that's what's changing in this map. So it says 1 to 7, so that means it was District 1 to start out with and is moving to 7. You need to click. Go back to the map. Okay. And then hit. We'll get it in a second. So that shows you what changed. 1 to 6, 1 to 2, 1 to 7. We look at Plan 2. We bring our variance down to 6.01% by changing the population around, moving that district line, taking people from one district and putting them into another. Again, on this map, you can see what changed and what went from which district to another district. We go to 3. This is our Plan 3, and I'm going to show you where the majority of the changes are in Plan 3. You have to go back to that one. And go that one. Yeah, bud. So what we have here, once it finishes, take this one and zoom in to these different areas. So what we have here is this large block right here. These blocks right here are moving from 1 to 7, and the reason that happens is if you look at this one, District 1 has to give up people. District 3 has to give up people. So they're the ones that are going to lose the most people to other districts, and the boundaries around their lines are going to change the most, which also changes the districts that they're closest to, because they're going to start encroaching into those districts. So in 1, we come down, it moves from 5,123 is 3535, and a deviation of plus 122. And the reason that we didn't get it any closer, I didn't take it any closer, scroll down to 1, the other one, is that these are nice clean boundaries. The Department of Justice likes to see contiguous lines that encapsulate. We don't want a lot of jagged edges and things like that if we can keep from it. So you can see that 1 gave this area up, and gave this area up, it gave some of that area up to 7, and made a nice clean boundary. So it moved to plus 122. Number 2 went to minus 29, and it also has nice clean boundaries. So it moved up to here. That went from 1 to 2. There's also one change down here in the southern end around Deerfield that follows that creek boundary, and you can see that block boundary follows the creeks. Sometimes you can't keep to wanting nice contiguous boundaries because the population just doesn't work that way. People don't live just where you want them to live. All right, we go to Ward 3, and it was the next largest, having to give up some. It ends up at minus 117. It's going to be our least populous in Plan 3. This area right here, now what subdivision was it?
Timber Cove.
Timber Cove. Timber Cove moves into 4 because 4 also needed to pick up some people, being minus 374. And that was a good change from 3 to 4. This changed from 4 to 3, a little bit right there to make up. And the reason being is when you move this population, it may be a large area. And we don't want to split up neighborhoods like Timber Cove or Green Oaks. We want to keep those areas of interest together. So we see a few moves here. This little bit right here moved from 3 to 7. Go up to 4 now. And 4 now goes down into what we were showing, the Timber Cove. In this plan, we have this right here, all of north side of the university moving from 4 to 5. And later in the meeting, we found out that one of our planning and zoning commissioners lives in that area. And that's the reason Plan 4 was created. And then we'll show you those few minor adjustments between Plan 3 and Plan 4. And then we have Ward 5. And that around 6 and 7 and 4 are the only wards that touch 5. 7 gave to 6 a little bit right there. 5 gave to 6 a little bit there. 5 gave to 6 a little bit right there. And all of that to help 6 out because it was so much in the hole at minus 649 and trying to maintain its strong minority status. Because 6 and 7 are our strong minority districts. 7 became longer all the way across the northern part of the city, trying to pick up that 600 people. 6. And then you got Ward 7. And 7 grew by quite a bit. It used to be this little area right here. So 7 picked up this from Ward 1 and this area right here from Ward 1. Does anybody have any questions on Plan 3? Now we'll show you the few differences in Plan 4. I think that will do it. And then zoom in to that area right there. That all. Right here, that's where our planning and zoning commissioner, we districted him out, and in consideration, trying to keep him in for, we moved this area right here. Also, we brought up our historic districts in the city. This was our Nash Street Historic District, and it's small. It's easy to keep in one district. We are able, it could stay in 4 or 5, but it is going to stay in 4 in this plan as the Planning and Zoning Commission. Scroll that a little bit. We have another historic district over here, and it's called Overstreet. Now, 10 years ago, Overstreet was not all in one district then, and it is a large district. It covers quite a few districts here, and it would take redrawing an entire map to move Overstreet all into one district. I have not found any state law anywhere that degrades a historic district by making it in more than one ward. But in consideration of Greensboro, we were able to keep it all in one by moving this back into 1, or moving it from 7 to 1, and this little bit right here from 7 to 1, making all of the Greensboro historic district in one district. The difference between 3 and 1 is it leaves us our population-wise variance. 3 has a 7% variance, and 4 has an 8.59. The reason being is 3 goes to minus 1. I have to flip back and forth. 1 gains a few of those people back, trying to keep Greensboro in one district, and that's the reason he went from 122 to 176 above, making his variance 5.17%. You add that bottom and top again, you get 8.59%, our maximum variance, which is allowable under the 10%. The only reason you would want to try to go any lower on that, and sometimes you just cannot, is that in 10 years you may not have to redistrict. Not saying that you won't, but the closer you get to 0, the more leeway you have. Having a high variance pretty much ensures you that in 10 years you may have to redistrict. But it's all about where people move, the population in wards, and is the least populous and the highest populous have a greater deviation than 10%. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I will get those sign-in sheets. Did everybody sign in the sign-in sheets?
Can you still blow up the individual, like, say that area that went 4-3, and the,
This right here?
yeah, can you blow that up? I mean, how many, I thought that was mostly Mississippi State.
See how many, your tool should be right there. And you may have to, can you click on it? You'll have to go back to the map view and zoom into it. Right there. Right here. Move that over a little bit and go to that Plan 4 dissolve and turn those labels off. No, you could have done it. Move it over a little bit and grab that area. I think it was, I can't remember. There's 98 people right there. All together, it's 98 people. And the only reason I brought it up there was to try to clear a line, but not that.
Yeah, that's fine, it just. I wouldn't-
And the road there may make a better boundary itself, since there's no population in any of those 3 blocks.
Yeah, so those north of it, there's no population in those.
Zero population.
There's 98 people that claim that corner right there as home.
That's right. That's what the Census Bureau counted.
I thought that was all Mississippi State.
It's all university property.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Forest products.
It's sorority houses at one of the blocks.
No, that's south of Spring. That's Forest Products.
That's Forest
Yep.
Products and all that.
No,
Yeah.
that's Spring Street making a diagonal across.
Mhm. No, but he's saying the population's down here where Ward is written.
No.
You didn't,
Yeah,
did Cut close that right there?
That's where.
And cut our aerial photography on? You'll have to go up.
Yeah, there are sororities over on that side.
It wouldn't need to include but one house for
County Judge. And, the Census Bureau, these are the numbers they go by. You don't have much option. You can't fight them. It just
Sure.
extends the process out.
I'm not arguing.
Make it a
Seemed unusual.
double click, the box. That one. Make your display 60%.
Why?
You need a little more. Cut the change, like Plan 4. Cut the labels off of districts. No houses in there whatsoever?
That's, forest products,
That's right.
So that is a mistake on their end?
I mean,
It's not the first mistake I've seen.
Sure.
It's probably a coding error. A lot of times the census will get them on the wrong side of the screen. Because what they're doing is you're probably taking like a 98 and they coded it from the apartment complex on the west side.
On this side right here.
You know, that,
How many
you see
people-
that a lot in small pieces.
How many people do they call it?
That's gonna be more than 98.
And that's usually.
They're saying zero.
Factor if you've got an area like an industrial area or somewhere where it's obviously not, you know, it's not a residential area like an industrial park or farm complex or a corporate complex. So usually it's just a coding error.
It appears that that block right there where those apartments are at, is that apartments? They say zero population. No, that's most likely what happened. And those things can be corrected, they just take a lot of paperwork. Give the mayor back his pen.
Appreciate it. You remember something.
Did y'all sign in?
No.
Okay, I'll let y'all sign this. Mr. Alvin Turner?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
On east, west, north, south, of all these wards, how far do the city, like police or, how far do they go before they is, they have to stop?
Like the city limit line?
Like if someone trying to get away from police, they can make it to university, or cannot go above. They have to call and bring them back across. You know what I'm saying?
I would say their jurisdiction would be the city limit line. Chief?
It is, unless we are in pursuit of the individual, and then our jurisdiction expands to where the pursuit takes us.
So it would be this line right here. He said as long as he was not in pursuit, that this is it. Anything on this side of that boundary would be his patrolling, or anything within what's called the city limits of Starkville.
And then that will go for all the other parties as well.
Yes, sir. And all wards, you do not use wards as any jurisdiction. Correct? They make no police jurisdiction lines. Is that, any other? Or maybe I'm not under.
Okay, when it comes down to voting, will the voting places change? Or what they saying?
The voting places will stay the same. But where the people that have been displaced, that move from one ward to another, after all of this is done and sent to the Department of Justice, and they give pre-clearance on whatever plan that's sent to them, the city will notify all of the people that moved from one ward to another one and tell them where their new voting place is. They'll get a letter.
So I like to Ward 7.
Which,
That's nothing.
Conagos.
is he in Ward 7?
He's still there. He's still
You're
there.
still in Ward 7? Yes, sir.
I'll try to get him in 6 if we.
Mr. Chris Taylor. No comment, you already answered mine. And then Ms. Vanderbilt?
I just had a comment. I live in Centerville, obviously, and most affected, not everybody's period. I just had a comment of a few things that have been passed on to me by people in our neighborhood today. It was in the paper, and then you alluded to it also in your presentation. A concern was just, the comment was made that made a good effort to keep neighborhoods together and keep board members and committee members, and just passing on a comment to ask the board and their wisdom to, while that is important, keeping board members and committee members, just to consider what's best for the interest of the people. You know, we're having elections next year anyway, so it seems sort of irrelevant if you do lose a board member because we're gonna have an election anyway. And, I mean, I realize we're gonna be in a different district, but we can also have a new alderman, you know, regardless. And also the committee members can be reappointed, and they're reappointed on a regular basis. So that just sort of concerned a lot of us, you know, that we felt like that was sort of letting the tail wag the dog, and that it should be the best interest of the people in the city. And really, we didn't understand the regard for the committee members and the board members staying intact, because that's gonna change, be changing anytime soon.
Want to comment? Thank you for your comment. He's writing them down, and then we'll discuss this before after. In another meeting. Does anybody, there were no other people on the sign-in sheets that wish to comment, but would anybody like to comment? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any concluding comments by the members of the board before we conclude the public hearing on the redistricting process? Any comments from the members of the board? Any comments from the room? Seeing none, this will conclude this, our first public hearing on the redistricting process, and without objection, I'm going to move us into a brief recess. Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, stand in recess. Meeting will now come back to order. The first matter that you have before you under board business is the consideration of amending the sidewalk ordinance 2011-01. Discussion.
I just want to note that at the end of that public hearing, just to be clear that everybody understands the language that was reduced to writing, and just to be clear, make sure I've got the right copy. I don't know. The one considered for now.
One considered for now. Here you go.
The one considered the one shown in the packet is clean. Obviously, it does have excluded what was language 4.8, and so nothing has changed on the map. The only thing we've done is taken section 4.8, which was shown in the public hearing document as part of the language. We have kept that in, added it back to the clean version, and it has been reduced as read, and given to the city clerk. So I move approval, that we approve the document as written with the addition of 4.8 back into the clean document.
Alderman Dumas has moved approval of the sidewalk ordinance amendment as included in the public hearing packet, with the following amendment as reduced to writing. And just for clarity, I'm going to ask the city clerk to read the amendment that's been reduced to writing.
4.8, specific exemptions are enumerated as follows. The City of Starkville Industrial Park area, including parcels on the west side of Industrial Park Road, Pollard Road, Miley Road, and Airport Road.
Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, just for the sakes of legality, I'm respectful request for the city attorney to give us an opinion. He may have stated already as to what is his legal thoughts and opinions as to how we should proceed with respect to this matter.
Alderman Perkins, I can only restate what I stated earlier. I don't have anything to add to that, which is that I think the proposed amendment tonight to add 4.8 back in is a good thing in the fact that it clarifies the intent of the board as to what a commercially subdivided development is supposed to do. The issue that then becomes the wording of 4.8, and I think the wording as proposed is a bit cumbersome and ambiguous, and I think it's enough that under our custom and practice it would trigger another public hearing to let the public be heard on that language.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney.
Further discussion. Do we have any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, please respond by saying yay, nay, or abstain as the city clerk calls your name, and this vote is in reference to Alderman Dumas's motion on the ordinance amendment as amended.
Alderman Carver,
Nay.
Alderman Sistron,
Yay.
Alderman Parker,
Yay.
Alderman Corey,
Nay.
Alderman Dumas,
Yay.
Alderman Perkins,
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn,
Nay.
3 yeas, 4 nays.
By a vote of 3 in favor with 4 against, this measure fails. The next matter on the agenda is a report from the Chief Administrative Officer on the advantages and disadvantages of creating a finance department. Ms. Spruill?
Thank you, Mayor and Board. In your packet, I provided a memorandum to basically outline how I looked at this issue. Ms. Sistrunk was tasked me at the last board meeting with looking at, in essence, providing the pros and cons of creating a City of Starkville Finance Department that would house the office of the city clerk. And that was what I looked at. And what I did was begin with other cities that are in my estimation, or that we have used in the past for other things that are comparable to Starkville. Specifically, I selected Madison, Ridgeland, Olive Branch, Oxford, South Haven, Vicksburg, and Columbus. And Alderman Sistrunk was kind enough to provide me with additional information from Hattiesburg, Biloxi, Meridian, Tupelo, Greenville, Gulfport, and Clinton. I have a spreadsheet that I put together that is in the back of your memorandum there that gives the information associated with that, which includes the name of the city, their population. Some of them obviously are larger than we are, but I felt as though we're heading in that direction, so I used the larger cities as well. The departments and how they treat those departments, the number of personnel included in those departments, and other functions that are included as a part of those departments. What I found mostly is that these other municipalities use the Department of Finance and Administration, or Administration and Finance, more frequently than anything else. There were only a couple who actually continued to use the city clerk, but they used the city clerk and then had a separate finance or accounting office. And so they did differentiate that, but the city clerk is still responsible by state statute for those functions. So I think in looking at it, that the most effective and informative piece is to say finance and administration, or administration and finance. If I were going to make a recommendation, it would be to default to that name. Yes, sir?
I mean, that's the name or what you want to call a department and things like that, but as far as the statutory requirements, all of these towns still have a city clerk that.
Oh, yes, they're required to have a city clerk, yes.
So what is their job title within a finance department?
Well, and most of them are the finance director / city clerk, or the finance director or administrative director. I believe there were still a couple that called them the city clerk, and then had the separate CFO or finance director, and that was when they had the separate heading, but they were still a director of finance with city clerk designation.
I mean, still, that's just a name game or whatever, make up what you want to call them, but do they all still carry the same functions they would in the city clerk's office?
Yes.
So this is just renaming a department?
In essence. Now, some of these also carried human resources. They carried IT. They had, there was another one, courts and collections. So some of them included additional functions that we don't have and that we have separated into departments. So particularly HR and IT and courts.
So as far as the function of the department, what do you recommend?
Well, my recommendation is that we do not reorganize. My recommendation is that we rename, because I think that sends a message to the people who would be applying for the job, which, Ms. Outlaw is city clerk and has been, but since we are now going to go through a change, I think we send a message to whoever wants to apply that we are focusing on some finance skills that that this board has indicated it wishes to highlight as a part of the way that we want to conduct our business. But the reorganization, I believe, should be left to the next individual who is selected by this board to serve in that capacity. So I wouldn't think that it would be appropriate for us to presume to reorganize at this point in time, give that department head a chance to look at the department and then make those recommendations. My recommendation was simply that we change that name. I think it provides some clarity to the public. Some people who aren't familiar with government at all don't know what the city clerk does. It doesn't mean a whole lot to them, but if you have administration and finance, that's some common nomenclature that I think most people recognize and understand. So that would be mainly my recommendation. It's just a name change for the department. And then if you choose to do that, then my suggestion would be that you rename the position so that when we advertise for it, it's advertised as the Director of Finance and Administration / City Clerk, or Finance Director / City Clerk, whatever this board would select. But I think it sends that message of the kind of skill set that the board has indicated that they're looking for. So.
Alderman Sistrunk.
And I agree completely with what you're saying about reorganization. I absolutely think that the replacement, although I'm not sure we'll ever fully replace Ms. Outlaw, I think it's only fair that the person who holds that position next guide us through any reorganization, and there may be none. But I agree completely that changing the name of the department does set a tone and an expectation, and is more understandable to people who are not as familiar with city government. So I move that we change the name to the Department of Finance and Administration.
Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion to change the name of the city clerk's office from city clerk's office to Department of Finance and Administration. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Sistrunk's motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor with 3 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of the approval of the job description of the city clerk and authorization to advertise for said position. Alderman Sistrunk.
I move approval of the job description as revised and to advertise for said position with the revision to change the title to Director of Finance and Administration / City Clerk.
Alderman Sistrunk has made a motion to approve of the job description as presented with the following change. Change the title of the position to Director of Finance / City Clerk. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
That works. And I think I probably need to specify salary grade because it is blank on the job description. And I would like to add with the salary classification of salary grade 18 as recommended by the personnel officer.
All right. So the motion in total is to adopt the, or to authorize, or
To move approval of the job description as revised and to advertise for said position with a salary grade of 18.
all right, now you said it as revised. Is there
That's
anything
what it
revised
says.
other than the title?
As revised from the job description that's on file currently. This is a new job description.
Got you. So it's as presented.
As presented.
All right. The motion then is for the approval of the revised job description as presented, with the following change. Change the title of the position to Director of Finance / City Clerk, and it's also noted that the position will be advertised at a grade 18 as recommended by the personnel officer.
Yes.
Is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Carver. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits?
I think it goes hand in hand with what we were talking about and the things that we have talked about over the last few board meetings about a greater emphasis on finance. So beyond that, no, I have nothing else to add. Mr. Vaughn, on the other hand, has something to say down there.
Alderman Vaughn.
Why did we change it from a 15 to 18?
But there's a memo in the packet that Mr. Boyd clearly makes the argument that salary grade 18 is more in keeping with the pool of candidates that we're hoping to attract when we advertise this position.
Maybe we had to offer Marquita that 18. Maybe she would stay here a little longer for us instead of leaving. Why we didn't consider her offering her that? Maybe she wouldn't have retired or we had to offer that. That's strange though. We're gonna wait till she go out and then we're gonna up the class up on it. We're gonna up the grade to 18 after she retired. Ooh.
The job description changed. I mean, the job
The
description.
job description has changed.
It has changed.
All right, one at a time.
Sorry.
Further discussion. Alderman Perkins.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, in our last meeting, the job description had a salary grade of 15, which was $47,847 to 63,678, and I got the packet and I opened it and I saw that there was a recommendation of a grade 18. It's very interesting how that recommendation came from allegedly from the personnel officer after a meeting, and I can only wonder what prompted that conversation. It is my opinion that this city is pumping too much money into salaries of new personnel. The pumping of the money in this enormous manner is, in my opinion, really having a very huge impact on our budget. As the gentleman from 7 said, we all of a sudden, we wait to the point that we get the retirement notice from our current city clerk, and then all of a sudden we come up with the brilliant idea we need to do a name change for the department. In addition to that, then, once we get the retirement notice from the outgoing city clerk, then we need to pump more money into this position. We've already created one new department this year, and I know we're not creating another department. We got new personnel in this information technology department. We got at least a couple of people there. We're going to pump more money into this, and no telling what the recommendation is going to be once we get this new, whatever the position was, the director, or this some title, whatever it is, finance director for this position. Very amazing how this worked. I remember, some 8 years ago, Marquita, had to just accept, and of course, she'll mind me saying this, I'm sure, because it's in the minutes, but she started out at $41,000, and and all the things that she's had, and we just very reluctantly and reservingly gave her additional compensation just to do the minutes. Some numerous meetings ago. So I think that we, in my opinion, needs to be very consistent and fair and objective in how we, as the governing body, handle the business of the city. And it is my further opinion that this motion does not reflect consistent and fair practices from this governing body. And hopefully we, the city, in my opinion, will start taking a very tougher and more and a conservative stance on these monies. We getting to a point now that we having a tight budget and a limited revenue. And and here you have a salary grade for a department head to come in at $63,684 with a maximum of salary grade of $84,755. This person's not going to be working for IBM and Xerox. This is the city of Starkville. This is a high price salary. So I'm not. I know the vote's already in place. I'm just speaking on behalf of the taxpayers, and we got the press here, and I'm just their voice in the wilderness. But on behalf of my constituents, we just want to the governing body to be aware that that these salaries of these new personnel particularly are just enormously high, and I hope that as we proceed with this and go into the future, that we will have a very conservative approach to how we look at these new hires. We have so many new hires. Almost every meeting we have a new hire, but the difference here tonight is the high salary. So we need to start streamlining. We need to start streamlining some of these departments. We need to reduce some. We have too much cost. That's the problem. We have too much cost. And we can, and therefore we can start streamlining some of these things. We can reduce the cost and the size of it, and then they can ease up some of these financial burdens that we have in the city. So with that being said, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to yield the floor, and I just wanted to say those things. And I'm done, Mr. Mayor.
Further discussion?
I believe
Alderman Parker.
I believe in our budget, meeting, I believe we had a report, and I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but I believe we had a report from our auditor that expressed that if we had somebody that could prepare some of those documents, that maybe we could save in our audit report. And I can't put a dollar figure to that. Do you remember a dollar figure that we could?
It was $10,000 or $12,000, I think. 8, 10, 12, somewhere in there.
So I think this, by changing the job description and having that person to be able to create that, we are in effect, we'll be able to save money on our audit each year. Just a fact that I remembered from our budget meeting.
Further discussion? Alderman Vaughn.
If this motion passes, which I know it's gonna do, will we still have the finance advisor that we are paying to look over Marquita and them shoulder? Or we still have that finance advisor that we paying?
It's a 1 year, I'm not sure. It's a 1 year contract or a one-time contract. Right?
Alderman Sistrum.
It was an agreed-upon procedures contract. The letter of engagement will specify specific procedures that are to be performed, and there is nothing beyond those agreed-upon procedures that we are committed to do. Nor do I have any intention of, at this time, of asking, or any time in the future, asking for any other procedures.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Sistrun's motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? By a vote of 5 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is a report from Chief David Lindley on the status of downtown parking enforcement options.
Mark Batiste is gonna help me tonight. He's gonna drive for me. I know it's been a long night. I'll try and be succinct with this. I was asked to research some solutions for the parking issues that we have downtown. And as y'all all know, this has come up recently. And I'm going to be presenting this to you, and if I had to give this a name, I would have to say Back to the Future. Go ahead, Mark. The current situation is, as we know, we're going to look at it in just a minute, but you have limited parking in the downtown area. And the situation we're going to show, we're going to look at some historical perspectives and the current possible solutions in summary, and then we'll have a discussion. Current situation. All right. Main Street is host to numerous local businesses and is part of the downtown community. As y'all can see, the current configuration is put us in the situation that we're in now. And the business owners fear that the parking situation hinders the amount of customers who visit their establishment. Basically, what that is saying, of course, is that they don't feel like people can get to their businesses because they can't park or find somewhere to park. Currently, the situation is this. You have free public parking at the courthouse annex, behind Starkville Cafe, and across on Lampkin Street by the community market. The areas of concern are the ones that are stipulated by ordinance to be controlled by the 2-hour parking enforcement. And that includes, and a lot of people don't realize this, Lampkin in its entirety from Meigs all the way to Jackson. Jackson to Maine all the way to West Maine, Washington from Mugshots all the way down to Lampkin, and Lafayette from Jefferson to Lampkin. All of this is actually supposed to be 2-hour parking enforcement. Now, we have not done that within the past few years because this is a situation where in the past we've had a great difference of opinion on whether they wanted it enforced or whether they didn't. Let's look at the historical perspective to see if we can get some ideas on where we're talking about. To begin with, Main Street parking is not a new issue. Here's Main Street in 1918. You can't get down Main Street for the horses and buggies. Here's the same view, 1925, with Model A's and Model T's, and right there is the State House Hotel, Abbey Guest House, if you will. You'll be standing in front of Old Venice looking that way, both of these shots here. Back to the Future, here's Margaret Way in 1963, and there's a parking meter right there, and that's at Lafayette, Maine. And until 1968, the police department was a telephone on a pole that would have been about right here, just off that shot. Now, Full Main Street, 1918, Full Main Street, 1925, Full Main Street, 2012. What I would like to do is work with everyone to find a permanent solution to something that's almost 100 years old. As I said, each time the topic arises, the police department's asked to find a solution to it. Some of the prior solutions have been heavy foot patrols with parking citations, parking meters with additional meter enforcement, and tire chalking. This was the most effective. In 1977, we took pipe cutters and cut the meters down off of Main Street because the merchant said that it was prohibiting their customers from feeling comfortable to come into their stores and park. Parking meters were effective, they worked, and I've done a lot of research on this, one of which was talking to Ms. Wade, who actually did that for over 15 years. And she said that was the best solution we ever had, was parking meters. And the chief, unfortunately, decided to do that. Wasn't even chief for about 18 months. He was not from here. He came into our community. First thing he did was cut the parking meters down, and shortly thereafter he left. That would be Chief Turner, who was there. And then we went from parking meters to tire chalking, where we walk around and mark tires every 2 hours. And that's labor intensive. It's very well, it's not reliable, because if you get interrupted in your rounds, you can easily go over 2 hours, and if you get interrupted, it can throw your whole schedule off. And that can be quite as easy. Someone want to argue with you, it's raining, something coming up, you're going on another call. But one of the first things I did in 1975 as a rookie police officer was chalk tires on Main Street with a stick. So that is the only solution that we have right now, is to go back to chalk tires. Okay, the historical solutions resulted in a decrease in parking issues and an increase in disgruntled patrons. And as the public opinion swayed, so did the parking enforcement. And I hope we learned from the past and established a long-term solution, which is why we're here tonight. But this goes in a cycle. They want us, they don't want us. But the ordinance remains the same. but the enforcement does not, because it has ebbed and flowed with the demand and our ability to provide service, depending on the staffing of the police department and our demands for service. Go ahead. Main Street, of course, is in a flux. In recent memory, it was heavy retail, and that goes all the way back to the turn of the last century, of course, when it was predominantly the only place to shop downtown. There wasn't any Highway 12, there wasn't any Walmart, there wasn't anything. You had to come up to all the stores that were on Main. And there's an example here of some of the retail stores that you had here in the 70s. Mullins, Caicos, Cats, Pennies, the banks, Lafayette, Main. Now, as retail moved away from downtown out to Highway 12 and the fringe areas, and for whatever reason, Main Street went through a transition. And in the 1980s, Main Street was not nearly as populous as it is now. I can remember joking with somebody in about 83 and saying after 5 o'clock you could shoot a gun down Main Street and all you would hit is a plate glass window and asphalt. But certainly that has changed now. Now we have revitalization of Main Street, restaurants, bars, lofts, boutiques, bookstores, all of these things. And that has brought back the demand for parking once again. So here we are again. And here are some possible solutions that I'm trying to bring to y'all facts from a historical perspective and suggest what could be possible solutions. Okay. As y'all know, the prime parking locations are limited. And as Main Street continues to grow, we're going to see more of that. It continues to be a success. We have to find an affordable way to deal with this that is acceptable. Now, the ordinances that you can see here are the ones that deal with this, that give us the authority to go up there and do this. Now, some of y'all might not realize this, all on and off-street parking in the city is free unless it's otherwise designated. And this is the designation here. Downtown area should be limited to 2 hours per vehicle where marked or posted. And in front of City Hall is included in this. And over the years, that was not popular for city employees, so they simply took the 2-hour signs down in front of City Hall where we exempted ourselves from the ordinance, but everybody else was still affected by it. But on the books, it should still be that way. If you're looking for a real solution that costs nothing, there it is right there. Have the businesses ensure the employees do not utilize parking spaces dedicated to patrons. The number one violator that we have consistently over the last nearly 4 decades that I've been here has simply been the unwillingness of the employers to police their own employees. Because if you took the employees parking on Main Street and delegated them or regulated them to park in the available public parking spots, downtown parking would not be nearly the problem that it is now. But there is a reluctance for some reason to do this. It has been done by individuals, but there is a lack of willingness by a majority to consistently do this. But if all the employees that work in all the businesses on Main Street utilize the 3 available public parking lots, we wouldn't have a parking problem on Main Street. That costs absolutely nothing. Okay, we could revise the city ordinances and go with some type of parking meters again. That's going to cost money. And it was very effective when we had it, but it would cost quite a bit to put it back. Now, obviously, if we did, we could go to some of the things that are being looked at, for instance, in Oxford on the downtown area, the square, where you put kiosks in, where people could pay. But it all goes back basically to meters, whatever form you want to do with that. And you would also still have to have a parking enforcement officer to check the parking meters. We'll look at some ideas on how to do that. But if you're gonna have parking enforcement on Main Street, you either have to outsource parking, like to a private security company. You can possibly get volunteers to do it, or you can get paid city staff to do it. There we have it. Simply stated again. Go ahead. All right. Mississippi State has talked with us about the possibility of them taking over downtown parking. It's going to be difficult to do. It would entail a interlocal agreement that would have to be approved by the university and the city and the institution of higher learning. We have two security companies that if we outsourced here in the central business district, one is Cobra Security, which is just around the corner, and the other one is Reliable Security up on Main Street. Cobra specifically has indicated that they would be interested in taking this and possibly providing that service for a fee, and they would provide the security guards. Now, Oxford right now, to give you an idea of what they're doing, they're considering contracting standard parking out of Chicago. And their logo is, we add ambiance to parking. And the cost that I've seen projected up there were, the initial investment was $500,000, and the annual investment budgeted was $375,000 a year. For that, they would have piped-in music, they would have very professional parking guards. They could handle it all. And you would have to pay for it by charging people $1 an hour, and they would put the kiosks in, and you would go and put your debit card in. If you wanted to park 3 hours, it would cost $3. But I don't think that's practical considering our budgetary constraints. We also discussed the possibility of whether or not we could go to the handheld computer system such as MSU uses. The T2 software that we would use, even if we cooperated with MSU, you would still have to buy some software that would probably cost in the neighborhood of $40,000, and each individual unit costs $6,000 to $8,000 for a handheld computer to issue parking tickets. So again, we're talking about a lot of money. Now, other considerations, you might could use volunteers. You know, they would be unpaid, they would be outfitted in uniform by us. There are your problems. Your consistent availability, it would be a liability, high insurance cost, civilians having jurisdiction before the court, and sometimes the reality of it, this is a very negative job action that can be quite unpleasant and confrontational. Because what you run into on Wayne Street is, as people see you issuing a parking ticket, they want to come out and move their vehicle. And then they want to get into an argument with you if the ticket is issued. And you're also up there to do things like write U-turn tickets, and a U-turn ticket is going to be about $150 because it is a movement violation. And a parking ticket is going to be anywhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $10. And you're talking about a patron that's come downtown to eat or purchase and this action is occurring, and then you have a negative mindset on their part when they go into the business after they've just received a ticket. And consistently in the past, I've heard that complaint that the merchants then get mad at us because we have alienated their customer who says they won't come back because they want to go somewhere on Highway 12 where they don't have to pay for parking and they don't get a ticket. So anything we do has an upside and a downside. But the problem is what it is. Some of the things that we were tasked to look at, if you had a dedicated full-time parking enforcement officer with benefits, even if you started them out at a minimal cost, it would be in the neighborhood of benefits of $30,000 a year. They would be covered as a full-time employee with all benefits. If you tried to go with 2 part-time positions, about 19 hours a week, where they wouldn't be eligible for 50% benefits, you would still be hitting somewhere in the range of $25,000. Now, could I use a parking enforcement officer? Absolutely. I'll use anything y'all are willing to give me in my budget. I not only would use the parking enforcement officer for downtown in the Main Street area, but I would also charge that person with checking handicapped parking in parking lots all across town and shopping centers, and helping with on-street parking problems all over the city. So that is something that I could utilize and could get quite a bit of needed enforcement effort out of this individual that would help tremendously on an existing problem that is legitimate. But oftentimes I don't have the resources to do it with the police force as it currently stands. As y'all remember, we are 55, and that is about 10 short of where we should be. We try and remain small, to be frugal, and try and do the best we have with what we got. But since we are short, sometimes we don't get to work on existing problems such as parking all over town, that this would help supplement that ability. Okay, so in summary, as you can see, Main Street's been an issue in the past and the present, and we've tried to do it every way I think we can do it. And most of the attempts in the past have failed to curb the issue. And we need to be prepared to provide the overhead needed to purchase equipment and pay salaries if that's what we want to do. And it could be a revenue maker for the city from fines that could offset some of the expenses. Just to be honest with you, it would take an increase in the amount of fines to do that. So that's something else that would have to be considered. The other thing that would have to be considered is the increase in docket load for the municipal court, which already is astronomical. We've gone from one session of court to 4 in a week. And I don't really know with their current staff how they could add this. And it might could be handled through administrative court, which you would get into the same situation that we are now, which is no way to elect if somebody doesn't pay. Questions?
Do you know if the Main Street Association has a policy on employee parking?
They don't.
Maybe not.
They've encouraged, and goes back to what Chief Lindley's saying, that
And that would be the first step I would want to see from their standpoint is for them to make an effort to.
Alderman Parker, we've all begged them to do that over the last 30+ years, and they simply don't want to do it. They want us to be the parents and punish the children, which are their employees. And they want to make a problem that they can control our problem. And we pay for it for their unwillingness to make their own employees utilize public parking lots. There is a very good example, and I won't name names, of a merchant that just opened a very successful restaurant in the downtown area, and he required all his people to use off-site parking where it wouldn't interfere with his patrons, and it worked perfectly. And he said, if you work here, that's what you'll do. And if you don't do it, you won't work here. That's just how simple the solution could be. Now, that wouldn't give us all the slots that we're gonna need at certain times, like on major event weekends, football games of that nature. But on those weekends, we'll never have enough parking. So what I'm trying to do is give y'all an overview, as y'all directed me to do, of the fact that, number one, this isn't anything new. And number two, over the last few decades, we've tried every way it is to fix it. And the most effective way to do it is put police presence up in every parking meters, but the simplest, cost-effective way to do it is for the merchants to police their own employees. And if we could do that, I would like to see what the result of that would be. And, but we are here at your pleasure to do what you direct us to do. I would only ask y'all to give me the resources to do what it is that I need to do, that you direct me to do, if that's the direction that you want me to go.
Further questions or comments for the chief? Alderman
I
Carter.
just kind of envision, it sounds like the problem is with the business owners, and that's kind of what, you know, sitting around downtown, the different restaurants I've talked to, it tends to be the employees, they can see across their side, on the other side that they know who are doing it, or the ones that are looking back at them and kind of got that everybody knows who the problem
Well,
is.
the employers
Attitude.
usually want their employees not to park in front of their business, which means they go across the street and park in front of the other fellow's business.
Yep.
And the problem is also compounded by the fact that the public parking areas that we looked at earlier are not as attractive as they should be as far as making somebody desirous of wanting to park there. They need to be repaid, they need to be restriped. They're in disrepair. And that might help encourage people to want to use public parking more than they do right now. But public parking is available, and it's not, in particular, the lot on Lampkin Street and Courthouse Annex is rarely used. Starkville Cafe behind there, that's pretty heavily used at about lunchtime. But I think we have resources and a solution to this if we could get some cooperation from the people that seem to be complaining the most, that this doesn't need to be a police problem, but it can be, and we can solve it. But it has a negative derogatory effect on, if we go up there and do these things that they say they want us to do, you see what the results can be. And that's the reason we're not doing it right now. Plus, I didn't have the people to do it as very important.
Trying to think outside the box, and may laugh this one out, but what if you had a sign or an ordinance or something that said no Main Street employee parking, and then can you enforce that, or is that's not even?
Well, one of the suggestions that we thought about was if you are an employee of a downtown business, that you be issued some type of parking decal, and that would relegate you to a public lot. And that way it would be easy to see who was in violation and who wasn't. And, you know, there's a number of different venues you could use there, but again, that would entail cooperation from merchants. It would, we would have to pass some type of ordinance that would require that. And, you know, it can be done.
Okay.
We can do anything y'all want us to do. It's just, how much money, time, effort, and resources we want to give on it. But, I promise you, if y'all want us to go take Main Street back, we can do it as far as parking. But I gotta have the money to do it.
We have sole ownership of those parking lots, the Lampkin Street, the Starkville Cafe lot.
They are designated as public parking. Now, who actually owns them, I don't know. But of course, the courthouse annex is public parking due to the fact that it's owned by the county. there was some discussion made also about trying to get some of the larger parking lots at the banks and churches to make their spaces available to customers too, but I don't really think that's gonna solve the problem because people don't wanna walk 2 blocks to go eat or shop. Everybody wants to park right in front of the front door. That's where the problem is. If you have to walk over half a block to be convenienced, you won't do it. Otherwise, you could have people parking at Starkville News or Cadence or places like that where there are always parking spots available. If we could get that kind of cooperation from them, nobody wants to do that, walk 3 blocks to eat. It's just human nature.
Edward, how have we typically handled maintenance on our parking lots? Have we had any? Well, and the surface of some of those, especially this lot at Lampkin, is awful. I mean, it's awful. It's hard to get in, hard to get out. It's not conducive at all. Can you provide us some understanding of what that would potentially cost? Yeah.
Questions?
Chief, thanks for the report.
Thank you all.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none. Thank you. All right, the next matter on the agenda, and Phyllis has been waiting all night, is the consideration of a matching funds resolution for application for a CDBG grant for Carver Drive ditch improvements. Ms. Benson.
Good evening. The fiscal year 2012 CDBG public facilities applications will be accepted no later than this Friday, May the 18th at 4 p.m. Your project, which is the Carver Drive Drainage Improvements Project, has a price tag of $940,995. $600,000 is the maximum grant size. We've discussed at a previous board meeting that these projects are very competitive and they are awarded utilizing a rating system, with match money being one of those rating factors. You are competing for $5 million. That's statewide what is available for this particular category for municipalities and counties of your size. So, CDBG or MDA would certainly like to see you match that dollar for dollar. And this year, because money is so tight, they're even giving bonus points for those that can over-match that dollar for dollar. But anyway, there is no set magic number that you have to match it. But since $600,000 is the maximum grant size, that leaves a deficit of $340,995. Your engineer has pulled together some numbers. He has projected that you can spend $230,995 in in-kind or force account services, which means that you'll have to come up with $110,000 in cash in order to move forward with this project and submit the application by the deadline. I'll need a resolution passed stating that you are willing to commit that $110,000 in cash and the $230,995 in kind for a total commitment to the project of $340,995.
Discussion.
Say that again. So we've got $340,995,000, or $340,995 total in kind.
Well, no, I think I may have messed up when I said that. Your total match for the project, in order to complete the project, if you indeed request the full $600,000 in grant money, will leave $340,995 that you have to put into the project. That can come down to $230,995 in in-kind services and $110,000 in cash.
Okay, so we're left with,
While he's adding, the 600,000 maximum, it's all or nothing, so there's no chance they can come back and say, we'll give you 400 of it? Or-
There have been cases where they've done that. If your project is teetering on that line of being the next one that either falls in to be funded or falls out, they have been known to call and say, we don't have the full 600, but we can give you 400.
And then our match would go up.
Correct.
But that would have to come before, I mean, that would have to be a board decision on whether they wanted to come up with that match.
Sure. Because MDA will not award a project unless the matching funds are in place. That's why I have to have that resolution as part of the application. It has to be spread upon the board minutes so that you as a board acknowledge and understand that you've got to put on, at a minimum, that amount of money. You are committed, and your project will be rated based upon that amount of money that you're committing to the project. Yes, Alderman Sistrunk?
Well, I was going to let the mayor, and certainly I'll defer to Mr. Perkins.
Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, just want to ask you something about this respectfully.
Yes.
Ms. Benson indicated that $110,000 in cash is needed. And I know the board earlier earmarked and designated $65,500, and I think that may be down to $60,000 or $61,000 now.
That's correct.
And so we just need the difference in that 110 minus the 60 or 60, whatever that figure is.
Approximately $50,000.
Yeah, right.
Can you expand on that? The 60,000 was from?
May I take this one?
Well, let me give you the answer first, and then if Alderman Sistrunk would like, she can respond afterwards. You budgeted $65,000 in fiscal year 2011 for this project. The only money that you expended on this project in fiscal year 2011 was for the engineering study that was done. So there's approximately $60,000 that is remaining that you chose to continue to reserve for this project. So that funding has already been earmarked for this project. Now, if we were to be successful on the grant, there would be approximately $110,000 in out-of-pocket costs that the city would have to bear associated with the project. So you've got $60,000 sitting in a reserved account that you've previously earmarked, and you would have to make an additional appropriation of $50,000. Alderman Sistrunk.
And I think that's a little disingenuous to say that it's only $110,000, because in addition to the $110,000 that we know right now that we're going to call a cash match, any budget overruns would also become the responsibility of the city, and we do have a history of sometimes having those budget overruns. The other thing that we're not accounting for is that in the in-kind services, there's a little under $100,000 of equipment costs that are being considered in-kind services, and those are derived from equipment hours. If I'm understanding where those numbers came from, those are derived from equipment hours times a FEMA approved schedule. So it is a number that is arbitrarily determined. Now, in that number, things that are going to have to come out of pocket are going to be gas, repairs and maintenance to the equipment, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Mr. Kemp, but I believe a lot of our equipment is teetering on the brink of being obsolete. And so a major project like this could push us into a situation where we are replacing equipment ahead of schedule. Those are dollars that are difficult to quantify, but I know how much it costs me to operate my car for an hour. I suspect that it costs considerably more than that to operate a bulldozer for an hour. And if we have 800 to 1,000 equipment hours in there, even at a nominal cost, we're talking about potentially another $15,000 to $20,000 out of pocket. So this 110 out of pocket has become 125, 130 out of pocket, plus any budget overruns. I think we need to be fully informed about what we're talking about. It's one thing to put numbers on a piece of paper, and they're all documented as best they can be right now, but we need to be aware that worse than getting this grant is getting this grant and not using the money, as I understand MDA's position on this. So if for some reason we got this grant and had to have more out-of-pocket dollars than we were in a position to take care of, we would position ourselves very badly for any future CDBG applications. The other thing that I think we need to be very aware of as we're going into this is that the board was presented with 5 options for stormwater mitigation or drainage mitigation there on this project. And while we were talking earlier about cost, and there was quite a bit of talk about being as economical and frugal as we could be with city resources, this project has actually chosen hands down the most expensive of those 5 options to fund. The original options ran from $175,000 to $850,000. We have a proposal that we're talking about submitting to CDBG or MDA for a CDBG grant that is $940,000. So we have chosen the absolute most expensive option for stormwater mitigation. We could potentially do this with our own funds without a CDBG grant if we had chosen that less expensive option for stormwater mitigation. I'll stop and let everybody else catch up with me, and we'll go again.
Couple of notes briefly. First of all, the budget has an 8% contingency built in. So you've got up to 8% beyond the actual costs that are budgeted that is built in to pad the budget, which hopefully would absorb any potential overruns, because you don't know until you send the project out for bid.
You don't.
It could come in under, but to be on the conservative side, you have an 8% contingency, which hopefully in any event would absorb any potential underrun. The fuel costs are not expected to exceed what's going to be budgeted for fuel for the department anyways. So you do certainly, hold on, one at a time. So you do certainly have fuel costs, but most of that equipment is going to be running anyways, and it's not expected that the project is going to run that equipment so much more than it would run anyways that you're going to incur extra out-of-pocket expenditures. The equipment is in budget as well. It should also be noted that we were fortunate, I guess going back to my analysis at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, that I asked for the help of the engineering department on in terms of how we could provide internal labor for these projects. That the city engineer and his assistant had spent the better part of a couple of weeks doing a very detailed analysis of just how many work hours and equipment hours that would have to be devoted to this project, to do a substantial portion of it in-house. So I feel like you have very good estimates as to how many internal labor hours are going to be devoted to the project, and it's because they had previously spent a great amount of time determining how that would be feasible. Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of a resolution authorizing the city of Starkville to commit funds other than CDBG funds to a project under the Mississippi Community Development Block Grant Program specifically for the Carver Drive ditch, and that we commit a total of $340,995, with $230,995 being in-kind services and $110,000 in cash. And I offer that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Perkins has made a motion to approve of a resolution authorizing the city of Starkville to commit funds other than CDBG funds to a project under the Mississippi Community Development Block Grant Program with funds to be derived from the following sources. These would be filling in the blanks on the resolution as presented. Matching funds would be $230,995 in-kind, local in-kind services, and $110,000 in local cash to accompany the $600,000 in CDBG grant funding. Alderman Perkins, is that your motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Perkins, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Discussion. Alderman Sistrunk.
Again, to borrow the phrase that someone else borrowed earlier tonight, I think that this is a situation where we need to call a spade and be perfectly honest about what we're doing here. The mayor has invested a great deal of political capital in this particular project. Every budget that we approve for a construction project has a contingency. We still frequently go over budget, and we don't know the answer to whether we're going to be over budget or not until we get bids back in-house. So I think to sit here and tell the general public or to tell the members of the Board of Aldermen that we know that we are limiting our expenses in kind and cash to a specific amount is disingenuous. Also, as far as fuel cost already being budgeted, we budget this year $26,000 for fuel cost. I believe that through March or April, and I've got those numbers here somewhere, we're pretty close to overrunning our fuel budget at this point in time. So whether we're going to have to come up with additional dollars there. So there's another cost. Also, the man hours that we are committing to this project is going to be, depending on how long the project takes, and I would guess that it's going to take 4 to 6 months at a minimum, potentially could be a little shorter. I don't know if it would be any longer than that because of construction seasons, but the man hours are going to be roughly 15 to 20% of that department's total man hours. That means potholes are going to go unfilled, other projects are going to go unfilled, or undone. We are committing a huge amount of our resources to a particular project, to a particular solution to a project where there's a perfectly viable option that costs us considerably less in terms of capital and manpower. I think, too, another thing that we need to be very aware of is that we have other projects that might not qualify for CDBG monies, but that are in more dire straits, I think, than the Carver Drive project. Maple Drive in Alderman Carver's ward has houses that have flooded. To my knowledge, there's never been a house that actually flooded on Carver Drive. It isn't a floodplain, but to my knowledge, there's never been a house that's flooded. That's not true on Maple Drive. Because it isn't a floodplain, if we alter the channel or change the path of that water, we're going to have to get FEMA approval. We currently do not have LOMAR. We're going to have to get LOMAR approval through FEMA, and we currently don't have that. It's my understanding that they'll have to sign off on anything that we do. I think that we're setting a precedent with this particular project that says piping and covering is our preferred option, and that's a change from what we have typically done in the city of Starkville. We have open channels throughout the city. Greenbrier has some, Longmeadow has some, Green Oaks has some. I suspect any ward that we talk about has open channels as the stormwater mitigation technique that is most commonly used. We're making a huge shift here in an area where there's not a real requirement for piping and covering. The drainage problems alongside Louisville Street are being addressed with piping and covering, but that's because it's very dense, there's a limited amount of right-of-way, and in order to put a sidewalk in along with the work that we're doing on Louisville Street right now, we have to pipe and cover that particular area. This area on Carver Drive does not have to be piped and covered. It can be handled quite adequately with channel restoration. Another unintended consequence of piping and covering these ditches is that we're going to have to go in and clear potentially 40 to 60 feet of area there. There are mature trees alongside that ditch right now that neighborhood is going to lose probably, and I don't know if they've thought that through clearly, that they're going to lose that. Let me see if there's something else I'd like to hammer on while I'm hammering away here. I do think that we need to take a longer view about this, because whether y'all remember or not, Mr. Devlin has told us that DEQ is looking seriously at points of contamination for water supply, and that they're moving away from wastewater treatment to other sources. By piping and covering this ditch, we're going to be not allowing that water to filter itself as it comes in contact with soil and vegetation, and we're creating a water quality problem, and we're going to be, maybe not this year, it may be a little further down the line, but part of our job is to take a longer view. We're going to be creating, we're going to be in the crosshairs of EPA and DEQ at some point as far as water quality. And ultimately, by setting this precedent, by creating a potential problem with water quality down the road, we are opening ourselves up to the most expensive solutions that we possibly could have for handling stormwater mitigation techniques, and those are going to be passed on to the taxpayers, all the taxpayers in the city, and to ratepayers if we do it through enterprise funds. But I think this is a short-sighted approach to a problem that is more political than it is a true drainage problem, stormwater problem. I think Mr. Carver has hands down the most difficult stormwater problem in the city, because he has houses that flood, and I don't think we have approached that anywhere else in the city, and certainly not on Carver Drive. I'll yield the floor, and thank y'all for bearing with me. But we are making more than a grant application tonight. We are setting public policy, and we're setting a precedent for the city of Starkville, and I think we need to think that through clearly before we cast our votes.
Mr. Mayor, may we recognize, please, sir?
I'm going to make a few comments in response, and then I'll open the floor for comments. Of course, the way our system works is I serve all the constituents of this community. Each of you represent different wards in this community, and I do my best for each one of you when you've got a project that is important to you, that is ward-specific, to try to marshal as many city resources and as many tools as we have at our disposal to get a project done that is important to you and your constituents, because your constituents are all my constituents. And I certainly have expended a great amount of effort trying to figure out a way to complete a project that has been ongoing in Ward 6 and very important to Alderman Perkins for a long time here. Now, this to me presents a sensible solution if we're awarded the grant. Now, we don't know after all of this whether we're actually awarded the grant or not, but that is what we're considering tonight, a grant application. And I certainly don't want to make any misrepresentation. Anytime you're budgeting for a capital project, there is no such thing as a budget that is 100% not going to change when the project is actually bid out and it comes in. So that's not the case here. Now, this is a very sound budget. As far as budgets go, I don't think you can do much more prep work than the city engineering department has done in putting together a budget that is going to give you as close of an estimate as you could possibly have on the front end as to what this project would cost. So what that tells you is, at the end of the day, if we're awarded this grant, the city's contribution that's going to be out-of-pocket cost is going to be in the ballpark of $110,000. That's the same process we go through with our overlays or any other capital project that has to be bid. As far as the, I guess, the precedential value of this, let me first state that I am not an advocate of the city attempting to pipe ditches all over town. It's not a policy that we can sustain financially. But to say that by piping this ditch, we would create a precedent that hasn't been created before, I think is inaccurate. We have a city pipe in Colonial Hills that pipes a channel. Just within the past decade, we have piped a channel on Edgewood. Again, I would advocate that this practice stop in the future. And this is a project that the board inherited at the beginning of this term. The piping had already begun. I would recommend that where we awarded this grant, we complete the piping of this project, and we look to a long-term policy on piping ditches that restricts the practice as much as possible, because the reality is we cannot afford to pipe ditches all over town. It's a very costly process, and there's not going to be grant opportunities for many of these projects, and the city is going to quickly run out of resources. Now, all that being said, I think given the magnitude of this project, given the fact that right now we're under a mandate with this project, we have an engineering report that tells us that project that channel in its current condition does not hold in a 100-year rain event. So we have a mandate to do something. And Alderman Sistrunk is correct. There are many different options, including opening that channel. However, because of the political turmoil associated with this project, there has been a stalemate on this board and a reluctance to accept any of the alternatives for the past 6 months that we've known we have a mandate to increase the capacity of that channel. I personally don't see that stalemate changing absent something that makes it more feasible to complete this project in a manner that is consistent with the case that the representative of Ward 6 has adamantly made. And this grant provides such a viable option. Again, it is, from a financial standpoint, achievable. And in any way that the bids come in, this project, I believe, is one that is going to be one that can be financed on city funds. So yes, I do support it and would urge you to support it as well. Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, very briefly, I'm not going to take much time. The hour is late and almost near going home time. We're there already, but let me say thank you, Ms. Phyllis, and your organization, the Golden Triangle Planning and Development District, for your working so untiringly on this project, and hopefully your efforts have not and will not be in vain. This is a matter that has been discussed extensively by the board throughout this term, and I don't need to add anything further. And I'm just respectfully requesting for my colleagues to vote in the affirmative. A good budget, great expert here with this budget. I mean, in terms of the grant application, and the application is due this Friday. And we've had the public hearing and great public support. This is a matter about promoting health, safety, and welfare. No politics involved. These citizens just wanting to be able to, have this matter done in a manner that is best suited for the matter at hand. And like the mayor said, this board inherited this project, and I move, as I stated earlier, hopefully that my colleagues or other colleagues will support this. And Mr. Mayor, I'm asking for approval on this.
Further discussion. Alderman Dumas.
I just got a couple of questions. All right, so $60,000 we've currently got. The $50,000 that's left over for the cash match, those monies will come from what?
Would have to be a future appropriation.
So that will be appropriated at the time that we receive approval of this grant?
In all likelihood, when that appropriation would need to be made is sometime next summer. Now, given that this project is probably, on the best case scenario, going to track through next summer, you would probably have the alternative to split funding years for that as well. Just if it is late enough in fiscal year 2013, you could potentially make some of the appropriation in fiscal year 2013 and some of the appropriation in fiscal year 2014. Again, none of those things are certain, but that is a likely timeline for the project.
And Edward, I see your workflow on this on the your chart. So this is a 922. It doesn't have titles up at the top, so I don't know what. Where you?
It didn't run off very well. It's supposed to be 11 by 17.
Do I see that sequencing starting 11/11 of this year and 8/15 of this year, and then progressing through?
Yeah, a lot of these are very. I did my best to put together a schedule. It's just very estimated, but I assume that we will award the grant in October 1st, and then we go through the process from there of the Lomar. And then we go through the process of pending their approval of the design, the surveying and design, and then the bidding, and then the construction, and then finishing the Lomar at the end.
And so what part of this will we bid if the question of fuel and labor force comes into be? What of this will be outsourced?
The entire project was unable to be covered by the grant, so on the third page of your report, I have some bullet points of what we are proposing to provide in-house through the street department. And it includes clearing and grubbing, site grading along the channel, installation of a crushed stone access road, establishment of temporary erosion control, that's after the clearing occurs, installation of the double 54-inch reinforced concrete culverts which are across the intersection there at Wasi, traffic control for that roadway cut, installation of 2 concrete head walls, one upstream and downstream of that roadway cut, and then the roadway repair of Wasi for that utility cut. That's all the work that I've proposed that the city provides, and then everything in addition to that would be bid out to a private contractor, and the bulk of that work is primarily the installation of the large pipes through the main channel.
All right, so as far as Exhibit A in the proposed plan, we would take care of the construction of the culvert under the road. So we would go in, remove those existing culverts, install culverts designed to spec.
Actually, there's an existing 60-inch culvert there. We would leave it in place.
Okay.
And install a 54-inch on underside of that existing.
So once that flow comes out and is exposed, then do we remove the 100-plus feet or so that we've installed to date? Or how do we remedy that undersized pipe?
Not according to this plan. It was proposed in the engineering report, one of the solutions was to extend that existing pipe, which I believe is a 60-inch, and install a paralleling pipe adjacent to that being 66-inch.
So would we do that on those areas where we've already put the 60-inch?
We would have to put an additional 66.
So we would put an additional 66 in there. And then we would have those dual pipes running the entire length of the project to where it's exposed at the last house. And all that work from the installation of the new pipe adjacent to our current pipe and then the double pipes out would be what would be the bid process, the project.
And there's some other things associated with that, inlet repair, our head wall again, some erosion control.
So as far as impact of view, would we have to wait on the Lomar to then change the culvert under Hawassi? Okay, so you'd be in and out of there first. Your workflow would be the first prospect, or the.
For the channel, and then the private contractor can come in and start installation of the primary pipes in the channel, and then we can move into the Hawassi intersections. I think the way the workflow would go, but, I mean, I hadn't really thought that much through it, but I think that would be how you do it. And we could work in tandem with the private contractor.
Further discussion?
I-
Alderman Sister.
I have one more comment, and then I can only trust that the people sitting at this board will make a good policy decision. This project's been going on for 20 years. If it were a good project, it would have been resolved before now. The mayor indicates that he doesn't advocate for piping and covering ditches once we're done with this one, and duly noted that we have reached a stalemate about this particular project. I'm the first to say that I will advocate for coming up with the money that we need to do channel restoration and stabilization like we did on Northside Drive, or like we're going to be doing on Northside Drive, and like we will have done on Hollis Creek and other projects throughout the city. I will absolutely be supportive of that. That is not a project that has gotten much traction with the board. It is a good economical solution, and I don't see how you can sit here and argue in favor of using taxpayer dollars when there is, even if some of them are grant dollars, because they were somebody's taxpayer dollars. I don't see how you can argue for using taxpayer dollars when there is a very workable solution to a stormwater mitigation problem. And I still say it's not the worst problem we have in town.
I got a couple of questions and a couple of comments. Edward, one's for you. As far as the percentage, what percentage of your schedule would it be during the season?
I thought that question might come up. I put together the in-kind estimate back in December 11th of last year. I estimated, this was the in-kind for doing the entire project, beginning to end. We estimated, I went back and pulled some records and got a total man-hour for the street department, basically about 23,000. And then added up on your in-kind labor estimate, I added up all the hours from that and got 2,770 hours. And if you spread that over a 12-month period, you're looking at about 12% of our force devoted to that for a year. If you look at just a construction season, which is typically about 7 months, weather depending, of course, is about 21%.
And we would not be able to bid it until we were awarded, is that correct? You know, a couple of comments about piping and covering. I mean, I've fully supported, I've supported all aspects of piping this ditch from the very beginning. We've done section by section, and I've supported that. I supported the application of the grant. I've supported some of the cash that we're willing to give to it. You know, we brought something up last week that I didn't necessarily agree with on the helmet ordinance about getting a grant and being hypocritical. If the city of Starkville were to spend $940,000 piping and covering a ditch, and then turned around and made a policy that you can't pipe and cover a ditch to every developer or every other neighborhood in this city, it would be extremely hypocritical. I mean, I've got people in Pleasant Acres that would love to have, I mean, they have a horrible ditch that runs through their neighborhood. I've got flooding issues in Sherwood Forest and Huntington Park that we're now taking a look at. I don't know that I can honestly sit and look at my constituents right now and tell them that we spent an extra $50,000 and we spent 20% of our labor force working on one project. I don't know that I can honestly feel good about telling them that at this point. But the number has just continued to escalate. The man hours and the in-kind services have continued to escalate, and I just don't. I find it very hypocritical that you would tell a developer, an investor that wanted to come into town and pipe and cover a ditch, that he can't do it, but the city just spent $940,000. I don't know about precedent from a legal standpoint, but I don't know how we could legally defend that position if a developer were so inclined to challenge that. And I came in here tonight really honestly. I was willing to support this when we were at certain numbers, but as I've looked at all the in-kind services and as I've looked at the additional cash contribution, I'm just struggling with how I can support this at this point. How you?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but correction, Ms. Fitz-Trump, that project been going on 30 years, not 20 years. And then you say some of the houses are not flooded. You hadn't been over there when it rained, so you can't say they ain't flooded. They have flooded. For your correction. And Mr. Alderman from Ward 3, have your people complained for 30 years about one project? Have your people brought this project to the board like these people have been bringing it problem to the board constantly? This been before us 20 times, I know, since we've been on the board 3 years. Have your people come to the board this many times with the same project? Any of y'all got a project, any of you in your neighborhood, you know Alderman Perkins and myself never turn none of you down for nothing that you ask for. But it just seemed like because it's in this area, it's a problem. And I got something to say to y'all when we go in the executive section. I just been looking over and listening and looking. When we go in the executive section, I'm gonna say it. Because I don't understand you peoples. I don't understand. You don't live like they live. Those kids can't walk to the edge of the ditch. You don't live like they live. They constant erosion is constantly taking their property away from them. You're not living like that. And you keep hollering about the quality of life. What do you want the quality of life at? Is not quality of life there for them? What are y'all thinking about? I don't understand. I do not understand.
Mayor, I got one last thing, and I will have to say, it upsets me greatly, and I'm to the point of resenting the fact that you think I make decisions based on where you're located and where your ward is. I have never made a decision on this at this board table that affects me in that way, and we've heard it, and I believe Alderman Dumas had some great point several months ago about how much money has been spent in those wards compared. I mean, there was less money spent in my ward on those projects than any other. So, I have never made a decision on this board table based on what ward it is. I've tried to make the decision based on what's the best for the city of Starkville. And that,
I say again, take the overlays off the street and tell them how much you spent. Take the overlays, the street overlay.
all
tell 'em how much
all
you
streets
spent.
have to be overlaid.
let's-
All streets
let's
have to
keep
be
the-
overlaid, so.
Let's keep the discussion to the grant project. Any further discussion on the grant project?
Can I say one thing that, let me walk you through the process real briefly.
Okay.
We're going to submit this application, if you so choose. It's due this Friday. Staff at MDA will do an in-house review. They'll send it through the different departments to make sure that it meets the minimum threshold requirements. Then they're going to send it to an engineer that they contract with so that he can review it, because, I mean, you know, they're just lay people that work there. They have a general knowledge of a project, but they want to get a professional opinion. They'll send it to DEQ and State Board of Health for them to look at. Then each project will be given a score. It'll be rated or ranked. And they'll take those projects as far as they can with the money. And then they'll probably even go a few more. And they'll call and they'll say, we want to come and do a site visit. And that's where they look at your project firsthand. And they'll sit down with you and they'll say, all right, we've read your application. You in your own words tell us what's going on here, just to make sure that I've represented your project correctly. They'll go back, they'll make their recommendation to the governor signs off on them. We have 4 months to complete an environmental review process. Within 12 months of the contract award, we have to be under contract for construction. So, those are just a few things. They'll give you a couple of years to get the project done. Getting it, a brief extension generally is no problem. It's just that it's hard for Congress to, it's hard for HUD to go to Congress each year and say, we need more money, unless you're spending your money. So they want you to get this money spent as quickly as possible. So I would encourage you that once, you know, if this project is awarded, you take it with great seriousness and get the show on the road, because we're going to have to move real quickly on it. And other than that, the only thing I'll ask is, with the resolution, I'll have to submit a copy of the in-kind documentation as well as a copy of a bank statement that shows that you have $110,000 in the bank. Any questions? Okay.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? I guess the last thing I'll say before going into vote is, we make grant applications frequently as a city, and some of those grant applications are for very large sums of money. Some of those grant applications are higher probability grant applications than others. This is a grant application. Honestly, I thought this was going to be a no-brainer, and obviously I was mistaken there. I thought it was going to be a no-brainer because it is a grant application that, if we were successful, takes an issue that this board has grappled enormously with over the last 3 years, and it makes it achievable for not a very large sum of city funding as compared to other approaches to the project. Even if you are to pick a less costly approach to this project, if you do it all with city resources and don't have a grant for it, you're still going to spend more money on this project than what would be spent under the grant. We've talked it to death, but I guess the only thing I wanted to say with those comments is, please keep in perspective that this is a grant application. Further discussion? All right. Please answer yea, nay, or abstain as the city clerk calls your name on Alderman Perkins' motion.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Nay.
Alderman Parker.
Nay.
Alderman Corey,
Nay.
Alderman Dumas,
Yay.
Alderman Perkins,
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn,
Yay.
Alderman Carver,
Nay.
3.
By a vote of 3 in favor with 4 against, this measure fails. The next matter on the agenda, if I can find my agenda. Oh, thank you, Ms. Benson. I'm sorry, I almost forgot that. Ms. Benson has put in a great deal of work with this grant application, so
And
thank
may
you
I
very much.
personally apologize for wasting your time. I'm very sorry we did that.
Thank you. There's always next year.
All right, discussion and consideration of the appointment of the acting city clerk.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Paul.
could we move this to executive section, please, because there's some personnel matters gonna come out in this.
Yes, and we don't have anything, well, we do have one matter pending on open session. Alderman Vaughn has made a motion to move the discussion and the consideration of the appointment of an acting city clerk to the executive session portion of the agenda. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Carver. Alderman Vaughn, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion, any discussion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Hold on. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. That matter's been moved to the executive session portion of the agenda. Alderman Perkins, do you have a comment?
No, sir, go ahead.
All right. The next matter on the agenda is the request for approval to advertise for a building official in building codes and planning. Discussion. Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of an advertisement for a building official in the building codes and planning department. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Carver. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
All right, one more time. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
Would you
This is the building official job description. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
All right, one more time. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 5 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. And that will carry us to executive session. Do I hear a motion to go into closed session? Motion's been made by Alderman Dumas to go into closed session to determine whether there's a need for an executive session. Alderman
Second.
Dumas, that's your motion?
Second.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Dumas, you speak on the merits. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. We'll now give everybody a moment.